Book 5. Now therefore let us direct our attention to justice and injustice, and consider with what kind of actions they are conversant, what kind of medium justice is, and of what things the just is the medium. But let our survey be made according to the same method as the preceding discussions. We see therefore that all men are willing to call that kind of habit justice, through which we practice just things, or are inclined to the works of justice, and through which we act justly, and wish what is just. And after the same manner, injustice is that habit through which men act unjustly, and wish what is unjust. Hence, these things must first be adumbrated by us, since there is not the same mode of subsistence in the sciences, in powers, and in habits. For there is the same power, indeed, and the same science of contraries, but there is not the same habit of contraries. Thus, for instance, contrary operations are not performed by health, but those only which are salubrious. For we say that a man walks in a healthy manner, when he walks in such a way as a healthy man walks. Frequently, therefore, a contrary habit is known from a contrary habit, but frequently habits are known from their subjects. For if a good habit of body is apparent, a bad habit of body will also be apparent. And from things which produce a good habit of body, this good habit will be known, and from this good habit its producing causes will be known. For if a good habit of body is a density of the flesh, a bad habit of body will necessarily be a rarity of the flesh, and that which produces a good habit of body will be productive of density in the flesh. It follows, however, for the most part, that if one contrary is predicated multifariously, the other also will be multifariously predicated, as if the just, so likewise the unjust. But justice and injustice are predicated multifariously, though through the proximity of their homonymy this is latent, nor is it more apparent, as is the case in those things which are remote. For the difference according to idea or form is great. Thus, for instance, clavis is predicated homonymously, for it signifies both that part which is under the neck of animals, and that by which gates are shut, viz. A key. We must consider, therefore, in how many ways an unjust man is denominated. But it appears that he is an unjust man who acts illegally, and he who takes to himself more of external goods than he ought, or who is avaricious, and also he who is unequal, i.e. who takes to himself less of evils than is equitable. So that it is evident that he will be a just man who acts legally, and he who is equal or equitable. The just, therefore, will be both the legal and the equal, but the unjust will be the illegal and the unequal. Since, however, the unjust man is avaricious, he will be conversant with good, yet not with every kind of good, but with that in which there is prosperous and adverse fortune, and which is indeed simply always good, but to a certain person not always. But men pray for and pursue this good, though they ought not. For they should pray, indeed, that things which are simply good, such as riches, may also be good to them, but they should choose such things as are good to their possessor, such as virtue and wisdom. The unjust man, however, does not always choose that which is more, but in things which are simply evil, he chooses the less. But because a less evil appears in a certain respect to be good, and of what is good, there is a desire of possessing more of it than is equitable. On this account the unjust man appears to be avaricious. He is also unequal, and acts illegally. For this very thing the acting illegally, or in equality, comprehends all injustice, and is common to all injustice. Since, however, he who acts illegally is unjust, but he who acts legally is just, it is evident that every thing which is legal is in a certain respect just. For the things which are defined by the legislative science are legal, and we say that each of these is just. But the laws speak about everything, looking either to that which is advantageous and common to all men, or to the best of men, or to those in authority, and this either according to virtue, or some other mode. Hence, after one manner, we call those things just which are capable of producing and preserving felicity, and the parts of it by political communion. The law, however, ordains that the works of the brave man should be done, such as that a soldier shall not leave his rank, nor fly from the enemy, nor throw away his arms, and likewise that the works of the temperate man shall be done, such as not to commit adultery, nor behave with insolent wantonness, and also those of the mild man, such as not to strike another person, nor defame any one. And the law ordains similarly with respect to the other virtues and vices, partly commanding and partly forbidding. The law indeed, doing this rightly which is rightly framed, but that which is rashly framed erroneously. This justice, therefore, i.e. legal justice, is indeed a perfect virtue, yet not simply, but with reference to another thing. And on this account justice frequently appears to be the best of the virtues. Nor is either the evening or the morning star so admirable. We likewise say proverbially, every virtue is comprehended in justice. And legal justice is especially a perfect virtue, because it is the use of perfect virtue. But it is perfect, because he who possesses it is also able to employ virtue towards another person, and not only towards himself. For many persons are indeed able to employ virtue in their own affairs, but not in the affairs of others. And on this account it appears to have been well said by Bias, that dominion shows the man. For he who governs has relation to another person, and is now conversant with the communion of life. For the very same reason also, justice alone, of all the virtues, appears to be a foreign good, because it has reference to another person. Since it performs what is advantageous to another, viz. Either to a ruler, or to the community at large. He, therefore, is the worst of characters, who acts depravedly both towards himself and towards his friends. But he is the best of men, not who acts virtuously towards himself, but towards another person. For this is a difficult work. This justice, therefore, is not a part of virtue, but is universal virtue. Nor is the injustice which is contrary to it a part of vice, but universal vice. What the difference, however, is between virtue and this justice is evident from what has already been said. For it is indeed the same with it, but not essentially. For so far, indeed, as it has reference to another person, it is justice, but so far as it is habit of a certain description, it is simply virtue. Chapter 2. We investigate, however, the justice which is a part of virtue, for there is, as we say, such a justice, and in a similar manner we investigate the injustice which is a part of vice. But that there is such a justice is indicated by this, that he who energizes according to other depravities acts unjustly, indeed, but does not assume to himself more of external good than he ought. Such, for instance, as the man who throws away his shield through timidity, or he who speaks ill of another from asperity, or who does not give pecuniary assistance to another through illiberality. But when he assumes to himself more than he ought, he frequently is not vicious, according to any one of such vices, nor yet according to all the vices, but according to a certain depravity. For we blame him, and for injustice. There is, therefore, a certain other injustice, as being a certain part of universal injustice, and a certain something unjust, which is a part of the whole of the unjust that is contrary to law. Farther still, if one person, indeed, should commit adultery for the sake of gain, and should receive money for so doing, but another should give money and sustain an injury in his property, by doing it, in consequence of being under the influence of strong desire, the latter, indeed, will rather appear to be intemperate than one who assumes to himself more than he ought, but the former will be unjust, but not intemperate, and it is evident that he will not, because he acts with a view to gain. Again, in all other unjust deeds, there is always a reference to a certain depravity. Thus, if a man commits adultery, the reference is to intemperance. If he abandons his post in battle, the reference is to timidity. But if he strikes another person, to anger. If, however, he obtains money by it, the reference is to no other depravity than to injustice. Hence it is evident that there is a certain other injustice which ranks as a part, besides universal injustice, and which is synonymous with it, because the definition of each is in the same genus. For both possess their power in a reference to another person. But the injustice which ranks as a part is conversant with honour, or riches, or safety, or if all these could be comprehended in one name, it is conversant with them, and this on account of the pleasure which results from gain. Universal injustice, however, is conversant with all such things, as a worthy man is conversant with in the exercise of justice. That there are many kinds of justice, therefore, and that there is a certain justice which is different from universal virtue, is evident. What it is, however, and what kind of thing it is, must be explained. The unjust, therefore, has been distinguished by us into the illegal and the unequal, and the just into the legal and the equal. But the prior injustice of which we have spoken subsists according to the illegal. Since, however, the illegal and the unequal are not the same, but different, as a part with reference to a whole, for everything unequal is illegal, but not everything which is illegal is unequal, hence the unjust and injustice are not the same with these, but different from them in the same manner as parts and wholes. For this injustice is a part of the whole of injustice, and in a similar manner this justice is a part of the whole of justice. We must, therefore, speak concerning the justice and injustice which ranks as parts, and after the same manner concerning the partially just and unjust. The justice, therefore, and injustice which are arranged according to universal virtue, and of which the former is the use of the whole of virtue, and the latter of the whole of vice, with reference to another person, we shall omit. It is, likewise, evident how the just and the unjust which are arranged conformably to these are to be distinguished. For nearly most of those things which are legal are ordained from universal virtue. For the law orders men to live conformably to every virtue, and forbids them from acting conformably to any one of the vices. But the efficient causes of the whole of virtue are those legal actions which are established by the laws for the purposes of public discipline. Concerning the discipline, however, of an individual, according to which he is simply a good man, whether it pertains to the political or another science will be determined hereafter. For perhaps it is not the same thing to be a good man, and a good citizen, but there is one species of the justice which subsists according to a part, and of the just pertaining to it, and which consists in the distributions either of honour, or riches, or such other things as may be divided among those who partake of the same polity. For in these it is possible that one person may share unequally, and equally with another. But another species of justice is that which possesses a corrective power in contracts. Of this, however, there are two parts. For of contracts some are voluntary, but others are involuntary. The voluntary, indeed, are buying, selling, putting out money at interest, suretyship, lending anything on hire, pledging and hiring a slave or an artificer. But these contracts are said to be voluntary, because the principle of them is voluntary. And of involuntary contracts some are clandestine, such as theft, adultery, witchcraft, prostitution, deceiving the slave of another person, insidious murder, and bearing false witness. But the violent are such as blows, bonds, death, plunder, mutilation, slander, and contumely. Chapter 3. Since, however, the unjust man is unequal, and also the unjust belongs to the unequal, it is evident that there is a certain medium of the unequal, but this is the equal. For in whatever action there is, the more and the less, there is also the equal. If, therefore, the unjust is unequal, the just will be equal, which, indeed, without any reasoning process, is manifest to all men. But since the equal is a medium, the just will be a certain medium. The equal, however, is in two things at least. It is necessary, therefore, that the just, which is a medium and equal, should be referred to a certain thing, and to certain things. And so far, indeed, as it is a medium, it is referred to certain things, but these are the more and the less. And so far as it is equal, it is referred to two things, but so far as it is the just, it is referred to certain things. Hence it is necessary that the just should be in four things at least. For the persons to whom the just pertains are two, and the things in which it consists are two. And there will be the same equality between the persons to whom justice pertains, and the things in which it consists. For as is the relation of the former to each other, such also is that of the latter. For if the persons are not equal, they will not have equal things. Battles, however, and accusations hence originate, when either equal persons do not obtain equal things, or those that are not equal have an equal distribution of things. This also is evident from distribution according to desert. For all men acknowledge that the just in distribution should be made according to a certain desert. All men, however, do not say that there is the same desert. But democratic men, indeed, say that desert is liberty. And of the oligarchists, some say that it is wealth, but others that it is nobility. But the aristocrats say that it is virtue. The just, therefore, is something analogous. For the analogous is not only the peculiarity of monadic number, or number consisting of units, but of number universally. For analogy, or proportion, is equality of ratio, and consists in four things at least. That disjunct proportion, therefore, consists in four terms is evident, and this is also the case with continued proportion. For this uses one thing as two things, as for instance, as A is to B, so is B to C. Hence, B is twice assumed, so that if B is placed twice, the analogous things will be four. But the just, also, consists in four things at least. And the reason is the same. For the persons to whom justice is distributed, and the things which are distributed, are similarly divided. As the term A, therefore, is to B, so will C be to D. And therefore, alternately, as A is to C, so is B to D. Hence, the whole will be compared with the whole, which the distribution conjoins. And if they are thus compounded, they will be justly conjoined. The conjunction, therefore, of the term A with C, and of B with D, forms the justice which is in distribution. And the just is the medium of that which is foreign from the analogous. For the analogous is a medium, and the just is analogous. Mathematicians, however, call such an analogy or proportion as this geometrical. For in geometrical proportion it happens that the whole is to the whole as all the parts to all. But this proportion is not continued. For the same thing is not assumed as the person to whom a distribution is made, and as the thing distributed. This justice, therefore, consists in proportion, but the unjust is foreign from proportion, and hence one person has more, but another less than he ought, which also happens to be the case in actions. For he, indeed, who does an injury has more, but he who is injured has less of good than he ought. The contrary, however, takes place in evil. For a less evil has the relation of good with respect to a greater evil. For a less is more eligible than a greater evil. But the eligible is good, and that which is more eligible is a greater good. This, therefore, is one species of the just. Chapter 4. The other remaining species of justice is corrective, which is conversant both with voluntary and involuntary contracts. But the form of this justice is different from the former. For the justice which is distributive of common things, or things of a public nature, always subsists according to the above mentioned proportion. For if the distribution is made from common property, it will be according to the same ratio as the things introduced have to each other. And the unjust, which is opposed to this justice, is foreign from proportion. The just, however, which is in contracts, is, indeed, a certain equality, and the unjust is inequality, yet not according to geometrical, but arithmetical proportion. For it makes no difference whether a worthy deprives a bad man of his property, or a bad a worthy man, nor whether a worthy or a bad man commits adultery. But the law only looks to the difference of the injury, and uses the persons as if they were equal, though the one, indeed, should injure, but the other should be injured, and though the one should do, but the other should suffer harm. Hence this injustice, since it is unequal, the judge endeavours to equalize. For when one man indeed inflicts a blow, but another is struck, or one man kills, but another is killed, the suffering and the action are divided into unequal parts. But the judge, by the punishment which he inflicts, endeavours to produce an equality, by detracting from the gain. For in things of this kind, in short, though to some things the name will not be appropriate, the injury is denominated gain, and the endurance of the injury loss. But when the suffering is measured, the one is called loss, but the other gain. Hence, of the more and the less, the equal is the medium. With respect to loss and gain, however, the one is more, but the other less contrarily. For the more of good, but the less of evil is gain, and the contrary is loss, of which the equal is the medium, which we say is the just. Hence, the justice which is corrective will be the medium of loss and gain. Hence too, when men contend with each other about legal affairs, they fly to the judge. But to go to a judge is to go to justice. For a judge is nothing else than as it were animated justice. They also search for a judge who is a medium, and some persons call judges mediators, as if they should obtain justice if they obtain to the medium. The just, therefore, is a certain medium, since the judge is also, but the judge equalizes, and, as if a line were cut into unequal parts, he takes away from the greater section that by which it exceeds the half, and adds it to the less section. When, however, the whole is divided into two equal parts, then men say they have what is their own, when they obtain the equal. But the equal is the middle of the greater and the less according to arithmetical proportion. Hence also the just (Nicomachean) is denominated, because it is divided into two equal parts (odi dicha esten), just as if it should be said to be dichaean. And a judge is called dicaistes, as if he were dichaistes, or one who divides a thing into two equal parts. For if when two things are equal, that which is taken from the one is added to the other, the latter will exceed what the former then becomes by two such parts. For if what is taken away from one of the equal things were not added to the other, the one would exceed the other by one such part only. The thing, therefore, to which something is added exceeds the medium by one part, and the medium also exceeds by one part that from which something is taken away. By this, therefore, we may know what ought to be taken away from him who has more, and what ought to be added to him who has less. For it is necessary to add to him who has less that by which the medium exceeds, but to take away from the greatest that by which the medium is exceeded. Let there be three lines, AA, BB, CC, equal to each other. From AA let AE be taken, and added to CC, and let that part be CD. Hence, the whole line, DCC, will exceed the line AE, by the line CD, and the line FC, and therefore it will exceed the line BB, by the line CD. This also takes place in other arts, for they would be subverted, unless that which suffers the same in quantity and quality as that which acts. But these appellations, loss and gain, are derived from voluntary contracts. For when a man obtains more than his own, he is said to gain, but when he has less than what he had at first, he is said to have lost, as in buying and selling, and such other things as the law permits. When, however, men have neither more nor less, but give as much as they receive, they are said to have their own, and neither to lose nor gain. Hence, the just is the medium of a certain gain and loss in things which are not voluntary, so that each of those who form a contract may have as much afterwards as before. Chapter 5. To some persons, however, retaliation appears to be simply just, and this also was the opinion of the Pythagoreans, for they define the just to be simply retaliation. But retaliation is neither adapted to distributive nor to corrective justice, though Rhadamanthus in Aeschylus appears to assert that justice is this, and that the punishment will be equitable when a man suffers the same thing as he has done." For retaliation is frequently discordant. Thus, for instance, if a magistrate should strike a man, it is not proper that the man should strike him in return. And if any one strikes a magistrate, he ought not only to be struck, but to be punished more severely. Again, there is a great difference between the voluntary and the involuntary. But commercial intercourse is preserved by a justice of this kind, if the retaliation is made according to proportion, and not according to equality. For by analogous retaliation, the union of a city becomes permanent. For men either endeavour to return evil for evil, for it appears to be slavery if they cannot retaliate, or they wish when they benefit others to be themselves benefited in return, since if this does not take place there is no compensation, by which the permanent union of society is effected. Hence the temple of the Graces is built in a conspicuous part of the city, for the purpose of producing remuneration, for this is the peculiarity of grace or favour. For it is requisite to return a favour to him who has conferred one, and he again should begin to confer a favour. But a conjunction according to a diameter produces the retribution which is according to analogy. Thus, for instance, let the builder of a house be A, a shoemaker B, the house C, and the shoe D. It is necessary, therefore, that the builder of the house should receive from the shoemaker his work, and give his work to him in return. Hence, if the first equality is that which is according to analogy, and afterwards a retaliation is made, it will be that which we have mentioned. But if not, there will neither be equality, nor will the bond of society remain. For nothing hinders but that the work of the one may be more excellent than the work of the other. It is necessary, therefore, that these should be equalized. But this also takes place in the other arts, for they would be subverted, unless that which is passive suffered the same in quantity and quality as the agent effects. For the communion of society is not produced from two physicians, but from a physician and a husbandman, and in short, from different, and not from equal characters. But it is necessary that these should be equalized. Hence it is requisite that all things should be capable of being compared with each other of which there is an exchange. And for this purpose money was adopted, and becomes, in a certain respect, a measure. For it measures all things, so that it likewise measures excess and defect, and therefore determines how many shoes are equal to a house, or to nutriment. It is necessary, therefore, that such as the ratio is of the builder of a house to a shoemaker, such should be the ratio of the number of shoes to a house, or to nutriment. For if this does not take place, there will neither be exchange nor communion, and it will not take place, unless the things compared are in a certain respect equal. Hence it is necessary, as has been before observed, that all things should be measured by one certain thing, and this is, in reality, indigence, which connects all things. For if mankind were not in want of anything, or if they were not similarly in want, either there would be no exchange, or not the same. But money was adopted by compact, as a subsidiary exchange for indigence, and on this account money was called (nomisma), because it is not established by nature, but by law. And it is in our power to change it, and render it useless. Retaliation, therefore, will then take place, when there is an equalization. Hence, as the husbandman is to the shoemaker, so is the work of the shoemaker to the work of the husbandman. But it is necessary to bring them to the form of proportion, when an exchange takes place. For without this, one of the extremes will have both the excesses. When, however, each person has his own, they will thus be equal, and communicate with each other, because this equality can be produced among them. Let the husbandman be A, the nutriment C, and the work of the shoemaker equal to the nutriment be D. But without this retaliation, there would be no communion of society. That indigence, however, connects as being one certain thing, is evident, because when men are not in want of each other, either both or one of them, no exchange takes place, as it does when one is in want of what the other possesses, as for instance wine, for which an exportation of corn is granted. It is necessary, therefore, that this should be equalized. In order to future exchange, however, if nothing should at present be wanted, that it may be obtained when it is wanted, money becomes, as it were, a surety to us. For it is requisite that he who brings money should take what he wants in exchange for it. Money therefore also suffers this very same thing, for it does not always possess an equal power, but at the same time it is more permanent. Hence it is necessary that all things should be estimated, for thus there will always be an exchange, and if there is an exchange, there will be a communion. Money therefore, as a measure having made things commensurate, equalizes them. For there would be no communion without exchange, nor exchange without equality, nor equality without commensuration. In reality therefore, it is impossible that things which so much differ should become commensurate, but for the purposes of indigence this is sufficiently possible. Hence it is necessary that there should be one certain thing, as a measure, and this from assumption. Hence it is called money. For this causes all things to be commensurate, since all things are measured by money. Let a house be A, 10 mina B, and a bed C. A therefore will be the half of B, if the house is worth 5 mina, or is equal to the value of 5 mina. But let the bed C be the 10th part of B. It is evident therefore how many beds are equal in value to the house, viz. 5. That such however was the exchange before there was money is manifest. For it makes no difference whether 5 beds, or as much as the worth of 5 beds, are given for the house. Thus therefore we have shown what the unjust, and also what the just is. But these things being determined, it is evident that a just action is a medium between doing and receiving an injury. For the former is to have more, but the latter less than is just. Justice however is a medium, not after the same manner with the former virtues, but because it pertains to a medium between the more and the less. But injustice pertains to extremes. And justice indeed is that according to which a just man is said to act justly from deliberate choice, and to distribute justice both to himself in making a compact with another person, and to another who makes a compact with another. Yet not so as to attribute more of what is eligible to himself, and less to his neighbour, and the contrary of that which is hurtful, but so as to distribute the equal to himself and others, according to analogy. And he adopts the same mode of conduct towards another person who forms a compact with another. Injustice on the contrary is that according to which an unjust man is said to act unjustly from deliberate choice, and to distribute injustice both to himself and others. But this is the excess and deficiency of that which is beneficial or hurtful, contrary to the analogous. Hence injustice is excess and deficiency, because it pertains to excess and deficiency. To the unjust man himself, indeed, it is an excess of that which is simply beneficial, but a deficiency of that which is hurtful. But to others it distributes in a manner wholly similar, and in whatever way the distribution may happen to be made, it is contrary to the analogous. Of an unjust action, however, the less extreme is, to be injured, and the greater, to injure. After this manner, therefore, we have discussed justice and injustice, and have shown what is the nature of each, and similarly we have discussed universally the just and the unjust. Chapter 6. Since, however, it is possible that he who acts unjustly may not yet be unjust, for what kind of iniquitous deeds will a man be unjust, according to each species of injustice? For instance, will it be as a thief, or as an adulterer, or as a robber? Or thus, indeed, will the difficulty still remain. For a man may have connexion with a woman knowing who she is, yet not from a principle of deliberate choice, but from passion. Hence, in this case he acts unjustly, but is not unjust, as neither is a thief, though he may have committed theft, nor an adulterer, though he may have committed adultery, and in a similar manner in other things. In what manner, therefore, retaliation subsists, with reference to justice has been shown by us before. It is necessary, however, not to be ignorant that what we at present investigate is the simply just, and the politically just. But this justice takes place among men connected together in society, and these liberal and equal men, either according to analogy, or according to number, with a view to a sufficiency of the necessaries of life. Hence, those among whom this is not found have no political justice towards each other, but a certain justice, and which subsists according to a similitude to political justice. For there is justice among those with whom there is also law, but there is law among those with whom there is injustice. For justice is the judgment of the just and the unjust, but with those with whom there is injustice, there is also acting unjustly, but with all those with whom there is acting unjustly, there is not injustice. But injustice consists in a man distributing to himself more of what is simply good, and less of what is simply evil, than he ought. Hence we do not suffer a man to govern, but to reason, because he does this to himself, i.e. distributes to himself more of what is good, and less of what is evil, and becomes a tyrant. He, however, who governs is the guardian of justice, but if of justice, he is also the guardian of the equal. But since if he is a just man, it does not appear that he possesses more of external good than others. For he does not distribute more of what is simply good to himself, unless it belongs to him by analogy. Hence he distributes the simply good to another, and on this account it is said that justice is a foreign good, as we have before observed. A certain reward therefore must be given to him, but this is honour and a gift. Those persons, however, to whom these are not sufficient become tyrants. But despotic and paternal justice, or the justice of a master towards his servants, and of a father towards his children, are not the same with this, but similar to it. For there is no injustice simply of a man towards his own property, but a possession, or a slave, and a child, while he is little and not yet separated from his parents, are as it were a part of the man, and no one deliberately chooses to injure himself. Hence there is no injustice of a man towards himself, and consequently neither is there injustice, nor political justice. For justice is conformable to law, and subsists among those with whom law is naturally adapted to exist. But these are persons with whom there is an equality of governing, and being governed. Hence there is more of political justice between a man and his wife, than between a father and his children, or a master and his servants. For this latter is economical justice, but this is different from political justice. Chapter 7. With respect, however, to political justice, one kind is natural, but the other legal. And the natural, indeed, is that which has every where the same power, and this is not because it appears or does not appear to be justice. But the legal is that respecting which from the first it is of no consequence whether it is established in this or in that way, but when it is established is of consequence. Such, for instance, as that captives shall be redeemed for a mina, or that a goat shall be sacrificed and not 2 sheep. And farther still, such laws as are promulgated about particulars, such as that sacrifices shall be offered to Brasidas, and whatever is established by public decrees. To some persons, however, all political justice appears to be of this kind, because that which has a natural subsistence is not mutable, and everywhere possesses the same power, just as fire burns both here and in Persia, but just things are seen to be mutable. This, however, is not entirely, but only partially the case, though perhaps with the gods it is by no means to be admitted that justice is mutable. But with us there is something which is naturally mutable, though not everything. But at the same time justice is partly from nature and partly not. What, however, the justice is which is from nature is evident from contingencies, and things which have a various subsistence, and also what the justice is which is not from nature, but is legal, and established by compact, since both are similarly mutable. The same distinction, likewise, will be adapted to other things. For the right hand is naturally more excellent, i.e. is more adapted to motion, than the left, though it is possible that some persons may be ambidexter. The justice, however, which is from compact and utility, resembles measures. For the measures of wine and corn are not everywhere equal, but with those who buy wine and corn they are greater, and with those who sell them less. In a similar manner justice, which is not natural, but human, is not everywhere the same, since neither are polities, but everywhere one polity alone is conformable to nature, viz. That which is the most excellent. Everything just, however, and everything legal are as universals to particulars. For actions are many, but each of them is one thing, for it is a universal. But an unjust action and the unjust differ, and also a just action and the just. For the unjust subsists either by nature or by order. But the very same thing, which when done is an unjust action, is not so before it is done, but is unjust, and in a similar manner with respect to a just action. But that which is common is rather called a deed justly done, but the correction of an unjust deed, a just deed. With respect to each of these, however, what the quality and number of their species are, and what the particulars are with which they are conversant, we shall hereafter consider. CHAPTER 8. Since therefore things just and unjust are those which we have enumerated, a man then indeed does an injury, or acts justly, when he thus acts voluntarily, but when involuntarily he neither does an injury nor acts justly, except from accident. For it happens that the things which he does are either just or unjust, but a deed unjustly done, and a just action, are defined by the voluntary and the involuntary. For when an action is voluntary it is blamed, but at the same time it is then a deed unjustly done. Hence there will be something unjust, which is not yet a deed unjustly done, unless the voluntary is added to it. But I call a voluntary indeed, as has been before observed, that which a man does of things which it is in his power to do knowingly, and not ignorantly, viz. Not being ignorant of the circumstances of the action. As for instance, who it is he strikes, and with what he strikes, and on what account, and when he does this, neither from accident nor by compulsion, as would be the case if some one taking his hand should strike another person with it. For he would then not strike willingly, because it was not in his power to avoid giving the blow. It may happen, however, that he who is struck is a father, but he who strikes him may merely know that he is a man, or some one of those who are present, but may be ignorant that it is his father. A similar distinction also must be made in that for the sake of which a thing is done, and concerning the whole action. Hence, that which is not known, or which is known indeed, but is not in the power of him who acts, or which he is compelled to do, is done involuntarily. For we both do and suffer many things which have a natural subsistence knowingly, no one of which is either voluntary or involuntary, such as to grow old, or to die. That which is accidental, however, similarly takes place in things unjust and just. For if a man returns a deposit unwillingly, and from fear, he cannot be said either to perform a just deed, or to act justly, except from accident. In a similar manner, he who, from compulsion, and unwillingly, does not return a deposit, must be said to be unjust, and to do an unjust deed from accident. But of voluntary actions, some indeed we perform with previous choice, and others without previous choice. With previous choice, such as have been the subjects of previous deliberation, but without it, such as have not been deliberated on previously. Since therefore there are three kinds of harm in social communion, those which are accompanied with ignorance are errors, when a man neither apprehends who the person that is injured is, nor the mode, nor the instrument, nor that for the sake of which the harm is done. For in this case he will think either that he has not struck the person, or not with this instrument, or not this person, or not on this account, but something else happened different from what he expected. Thus one man may strike another, not for the purpose of wounding, but of stimulating him, and in so doing may accidentally wound him. Or he may not strike the person whom he intended to strike, or not in the way he intended. When therefore harm is done unintentionally, it is a misfortune, but when it is done not unintentionally, yet without vice, it is an error. For a man then errs, when the principle of the cause is in himself, but he is unfortunate when the principle is external to him. When, however, harm is done knowingly, but without previous deliberation, it is a deed unjustly done. As for instance, whatever happens to men through anger, or other passions, which are necessary or natural. For those who injure others, and err through the influence of these passions, act indeed unjustly, and their deeds are unjustly done. Nevertheless, they are not yet unjust on account of these actions, nor depraved, for the harm which they did was not through depravity. But when a man injures another from deliberate choice, he is unjust and depraved. Hence, those deeds which are the effect of anger are well judged not to be the result of previous design. For the principle of action is not in him who is angry, but in him who excited his anger. Again, when one man hurts another from anger, there is no controversy about the deed, as to its having been done, but about the justice of it. For anger is excited on account of apparent injustice. For here there is no controversy about the existence of the thing, as there is in contracts, in which it is necessary that one of the contractors should be a depraved character, unless his conduct is the effect of oblivion. But acknowledging the fact, they controvert the justice of it. He, however, who hurts another person deliberately, is not ignorant of the deed. Hence, the one of these thinks he is injured, but the other thinks he is not. But he who does harm to another person from deliberate choice acts unjustly. And he who injures another according to those deeds which are done unjustly is unjust, when he acts contrary to proportion or to the equal. In a similar manner also, he is just when he acts justly from previous choice, but he acts justly if he only acts willingly. Of involuntary actions, however, some deserve to be pardoned, but others do not. For such involuntary errors, as are not only committed ignorantly, but also through ignorance, deserve to be pardoned. But such as are not committed through ignorance, but ignorantly, yet from passion, neither natural nor human, do not deserve to be pardoned. CHAPTER 9. It may, however, be doubted whether a distinction has been sufficiently made by us, between being injured and injuring. In the first place, indeed, if the thing is as Euripides asserts it to be, when he absurdly says, To speak briefly, I may kill my mother, both of us being willing, or I being unwilling, and she willing. For is it true or not, that a person can be willingly injured? Or is every one unwillingly injured, in the same manner as every one who does an injury does it willingly? Or do some persons suffer an injury voluntarily, and others involuntarily? And a similar inquiry may also be made with respect to obtaining justice. For to act justly is wholly a voluntary thing. Hence, the being injured and obtaining justice are deservedly opposed in a similar manner to each other, so that they are either voluntary or involuntary. It may, however, appear to be absurd, that in obtaining justice, the whole should be voluntary, for some persons obtain justice unwillingly. And this also may be doubted, whether every one who suffers something unjust is injured, or whether, as it is in acting, so it is in suffering. For it is possible in both these to obtain what is just from accident. And it is evident that the like also may take place in things unjust. For it is not the same thing to do unjust things, and to do an injury, nor is it the same thing to suffer unjust things, and to be injured. The like also takes place in acting justly, and obtaining justice. For it is impossible to be injured, unless there is some one who does the injury, or to obtain justice, unless there is some one who acts justly. But if to do an injury is simply to hurt some one willingly, and to hurt willingly is to do so knowing the person who is hurt, and the instrument, and the manner in which he is hurt, but the intemperate man willingly hurts himself, if this be the case, he will be voluntarily injured, and it will be possible for a man to injure himself. This, however, is also one of the things which are dubious, whether it is possible for a man to injure himself. Farther still, a man may voluntarily, through intemperance, be injured by another person, so that it will be possible for a man to be injured voluntarily. Or shall we say that the definition which we have given of doing an injury, viz. That it is to hurt some one voluntarily, is not right? But we must add the words, to hurt, knowing the person who is hurt, and the instrument, and the manner in which he is hurt, contrary to his will? A man, therefore, may be hurt, and suffer unjust things willingly. But no one is willingly injured, for no one wishes to be injured, not even the intemperate man, but he acts contrary to his will. For neither does any one wish for that which he does not fancy to be good, but the intemperate man does that, which he does not think ought to be done. But he who gives what is his own, as Homer says Glaucus gave to Diomed, For For Diomede's brass arms of mean device, For which 9 oxen paid a vulgar price, He gave his own of gold divinely wrought, 100 beeves the shining purchase bought. Is not injured, for it is in his power to give, or not to give. But to be injured is not in his power, but it is necessary that the person should exist by whom the injury is done. Concerning the being injured, therefore, it is evident that it is not voluntary. Of those things, however, which we propose to discuss, 2 particulars remain to be explained, whether he does an injury who distributes to another person more than he deserves, or the person who receives the distribution. For if what we before observed is possible, and he who distributes, but not he who possesses more, does the injury, if any one distributes to another more than to himself, knowingly and willingly, he will himself injure himself, which modest men appear to do. For a worthy man distributes less to himself than to others. Or shall we say that neither is this thing simple? For he who distributes less to himself than to others of certain good things, will vindicate to himself more of some other good, if it should so happen, as for instance of renown, or of that which is simply beautiful in conduct. Again, the doubt is also dissolved from the definition of doing an injury. For he who does it suffers nothing contrary to his will, hence he is not on this account injured, but even admitting that he is only hurt. It is also evident that he who distributes more than the receiver deserves, does an injury, but not the receiver. For it is not the person in whom injustice is inherent who does the injury, but he to whom to do this is voluntary. But this is the man from whom the principle of the action proceeds, which is in the distributor, but not in the receiver. Farther still, since to act is predicated multifariously, and things inanimate in a certain respect kill, the band as well as the servant by the command of his master, these indeed do not act injuriously, but they do unjust things. Again, if a man being indeed ignorant judges, he does not do an injury according to the legally just, nor is his judgment unjust, yet in a certain respect it is unjust. For the legally just differs from the first justice, or that which has a natural subsistence. But if he should judge unjustly knowingly, he will vindicate to himself more either of favour or of vengeance. As, therefore, if some one should partake of a deed unjustly done, thus also he who on account of these things judges unjustly, will possess more. For in those things, he who adjudges a field to another person, receives in return not a field but money. Men, however, are of opinion that it is in their power to do an injury, and that on this account it is easy to be just. But it is not so. For to have connection with the wife of a neighbour, to strike another person, and to give money with the hand, are things easy, and in the power of those who do them. But to do these things with a certain disposition of mind, is neither easy, nor in the power of those who do them. In a similar manner, also, the multitude fancy that there is no portion of wisdom in knowing what is just, and what is unjust, because it is not difficult to understand those things about which the laws speak. These things, however, are not just, except from accident, but they are then just, when they are performed after a certain manner, and distributed after a certain manner. But this is a greater work than to know things that are salubrious. For there, indeed, it is easy to know honey and wine, and hellebore, and burning and cutting, but how it is necessary to distribute these, in order to produce health, and to whom, and when they are to be distributed, is as great a work as to be a physician. On this very account the multitude fancy that it is no less the province of a just man, than of an unjust man, to do an injury, because the just man is no less, but is even more able to do each of these, than the unjust man. For, according to them, a just man may have connection with the wife of another man, and may strike another person, and a brave man may throw away his shield, and betaking himself to flight, may run where he pleases. To act cowardly, however, and to do an injury, is not merely to do these things, except from accident, but it consists in doing them with a certain disposition of mind, i.e. with promptitude and delight, just as to perform the office of a physician, and to restore to health, does not merely consist in cutting, or not cutting, in giving or not giving medicine, but in doing these after a certain manner. But just things subsist among those with whom there is a participation of things which are simply good. And in these there is also excess and defect. For to some beings, as perhaps to the gods, justice is not a good, because in them there is no excess or deficiency. But to others, as to men incurable and vicious, no part of things simply good is beneficial, but all of them are noxious. And to others they are useful to a certain extent. And on this account justice is a human good. Chapter 10. It now follows that we should speak concerning equity, and the equitable, and show how equity, indeed, subsists with reference to justice, and the equitable with reference to the just. For to those who consider rightly, the equitable appears to be neither simply the same, nor yet different in genus from the just. And at one time indeed, we praise the equitable, and the man of equity, so that, also, transferring this name to other things, we praise a man by calling him a more equitable, instead of a good man, manifesting by this that it is a better appellation. But at another time, to those who follow reason, it appears to be absurd, that the equitable, if it is something different from the just, should be laudable. For either the just is not a worthy thing, or the equitable is not just, if it is different from the just, or if they are both worthy things, both are the same. The doubt therefore concerning the equitable nearly happens through these particulars. All these, however, are after a certain manner right, and there is nothing in them which is contrary and adverse to itself. For the equitable being something that is just, is a better just thing, and is not better than the just, as if it were some other genus. The just, therefore, and the equitable are the same thing, and both of them being worthy things, the equitable is the more excellent of the two. A doubt however still remains that though the equitable is indeed just, yet it is not the legally just, but is a correction of it. But the cause of this is, that every law indeed is universal, but it cannot speak universally with rectitude about certain particulars. In those things, therefore, in which it is necessary to speak universally, but in which this cannot be done rightly, the law assumes that which happens for the most part, not being ignorant of the fault which has been committed. And in thus doing it acts no less rightly, for the fault is not in the law, nor in the legislator, but in the nature of the thing. For such directly is the matter of the thing which pertains to action. When the law, therefore, speaks universally, and something after this should happen besides, then it is right to correct what the legislator has omitted, and the error which he has committed in speaking simply, since the legislator himself would adopt such correction if he were present, and would have legally established this if he had known it. Hence the equitable is just, and is better than a certain justice. It is not, however, better than what is simply just, but it is better than the justice which errs through speaking simply and generally. And this is the nature of the equitable, that it is a correction of law, where law is deficient on account of speaking universally. For this is the cause why all things are not according to law, that concerning certain things it is impossible to establish a law. Hence a decree is necessary, for of the indefinite the rule also is indefinite. Just as of a Lesbian building, the rule is leaden, since the rule is bent conformable to the figure of the stone, and does not remain the same. Thus also a decree is adapted to things themselves. It is evident therefore what the equitable and the just are, and what the justice is which the equitable excels. It is likewise manifest from this who is an equitable man. For he who deliberately chooses and practices things of this kind, and who is not an accurate distributor of justice in the rigid sense of the word, but remits something of the rigour of the law, though the law is favourable to such rigour, is an equitable man. And the habit itself is equity, being a certain justice, and not a different habit. Chapter 11. From what has been said, also, it is evident whether it is possible for a man to injure himself or not. For there are some just things established by law which pertain to the whole of virtue. Thus, for instance, the law does not order a man to destroy himself, and it forbids what it does not command. Again, when one man hurts another contrary to law, who has not hurt him, he does an injury willingly. But he does an injury willingly, who does it knowing the person whom he injures, and the instrument, and the manner in which he does it. But he who destroys himself through anger, does this willingly contrary to right reason, which the law does not permit. Hence he does an injury. But to whom? Is it not to the city, but not to himself? For he voluntarily suffers, but no one is voluntarily injured. Hence, also, the city punishes him, and a certain disgrace is attached to him who destroys himself, as one who injures the city. Farther still, it is not possible for a man to injure himself in that way in which he is unjust, who only acts unjustly, and is not entirely depraved, for this character is different from him. For the unjust man is in a certain respect so depraved as the timid man is, but not as possessing the whole of depravity. Hence, neither according to this improbity does he do himself an injury. For if he did, the same thing might be taken away, and added at the same time to the same thing. But this is impossible. It is however necessary that the just and the unjust should always exist in more than one person. Again, he who does an injury does it voluntarily, and from deliberate choice, and with a precedency in time. For he who injures another because he has been injured by him, does not appear to act unjustly, but he who injures himself, suffers and does the same things at the same time. Farther still, a man would be injured willingly, to which may be added, that no one does an injury without a particular species of injustice. But no one commits adultery with his own wife, nor does any one dig through his own wall, nor commit a theft on his own property. In short, the impossibility that a man should injure himself is evident from the conclusions made by us respecting the being voluntarily injured. It is likewise evident that both to be injured and to injure are bad things, for the one is to have less, but the other more than the medium, in the same manner as the salubrious in medicine, and that which contributes to a good habit of body in the gymnastic art. At the same time, however, it is worse to injure than to be injured. For to do an injury is accompanied with vice, and is blameable, and with vice, which is either perfect, and simply vice, or nearly so. For not everything which is voluntary is accompanied with injustice, but to be injured is without vice and injustice. Essentially therefore it is less bad to be injured than to do an injury, but from accident nothing prevents it from being a greater evil. Art, however, pays no attention to this, but it says that the pleurisy is a greater disease than a lame foot, though it may happen that the latter may be a greater evil than the former, if a man, in consequence of being lame, should fall, and thus be taken by enemies, and put to death. Metaphorically speaking, however, and from similitude, the whole man is not just to the whole of himself, but one part of him towards another part, yet not according to every kind of justice, but according to the despotic or economic. For in these discussions it must be admitted that the rational differs from the irrational part of the soul. And if we look to these, it appears that there is a certain injustice of a man towards himself, because it is possible in these parts for a man to suffer something adverse to his own appetites. As therefore, between a governor and him who is governed, there is a certain justice towards each other, this is also the case between these parts of the soul. After this manner, therefore, we have discussed justice and the other ethical virtues. End of Book 5. Book 6. Chapter 1. Since, however, we have before observed that it is necessary the medium in conduct should be chosen, and neither excess nor deficiency, but the medium is to act as right reason prescribes, let us now consider what right reason is. For in all the above mentioned habits, as in other things, there is a certain scope, to which he who possesses reason, looking, acts with intention and remission. And there is a certain boundary of media, which we say are situated between excess and defect, and which exist conformably to right reason. Thus to speak, however, is indeed true, but is not at all clear. For in other pursuits also, with which science is conversant, it is indeed true to say that it is not proper to labour, either more or less, nor to be indolent, but to labour moderately, and as right reason prescribes. He, however, who alone knows this, will know nothing more, as if on inquiring what kind of things are to be administered to the body, it should be said, they are such as medicine and he who possesses the medical art prescribe. Hence, it is necessary with respect to the habits of the soul, that this should not only be truly said, but that it should also be definitely shown, what right reason is, and what is the definition of it. But we have distributed the virtues of the soul, and have said that some of them are ethical, and others dianoetical, or belonging to the discursive power of the soul. With respect to the ethical virtues, therefore, we have indeed discussed them. But with respect to the remaining virtues, these we shall discuss after we have first spoken concerning the soul. It has, therefore, been before observed by us, that there are two parts of the soul, that which possesses reason, and that which is irrational. But now we shall make a division after the same manner of the part which possesses reason. And it must be admitted that there are two parts possessing reason. One, indeed, by which we survey those kinds of beings, the principles of which cannot subsist otherwise than they do. And the other, by which we survey things of a contingent nature. For, since the objects of knowledge are specifically different, it follows that there are, also, different species of knowledge. For it is necessary that knowledge should be similar to the thing known, and that the knowledge of that which is necessary should be necessary, but contingent of that which is contingent. For all knowledge subsists according to similitude and affinity, since it is a certain adaptation and contact of that which is known, and that which knows. But of these parts of the soul, the one is called scientific, but the other ratiocinative. For to consult and reason are the same thing. No one, however, consults about things which cannot subsist otherwise than they do. So that the ratiocinative power is one certain part of the rational part of the soul. It must, therefore, be shown what is the best habit of each of these, for this is the virtue of each. But virtue is referred to its proper work. Chapter 2. There are, however, three things in the soul which have dominion over action and truth, viz. Sense, intellect, and appetite. But of these, sense is the principle of no one action, which is evident from this, that brutes have, indeed, sense, but have no communion with action, so as to have dominion over it. What, however, affirmation and negation are in the discursive energy of the rational part, that pursuit and avoidance are in appetite. Hence, since ethical virtue is a habit accompanied with deliberate choice, but deliberate choice is an appetite adapted to consultation, hence it is necessary that reason should be true, and the appetite right, if the deliberate choice is good, and that the one should assert, and the other pursue the same things. This discursive energy of the soul, therefore, by which we judge that something is to be desired, is practical reason, and practical truth. But of the discursive energy of reason, which is contemplative, and neither practical nor effective, the good and the evil are truth and falsehood. For this is the work of the whole of the discursive power. The work, however, of the practical, and at the same time discursive energy of reason, is truth subsisting in concord with right appetite. The principle, therefore, of action, whence motion is derived, is deliberate choice, though this principle is not the final cause of action. But appetite, and that reason which is for the sake of something, or which is directed to the final cause, are the principles of deliberate choice. Hence, deliberate choice is not without intellect, and the discursive energy of reason, nor is it without the ethical habit. For good conduct, and the contrary to it in action, are not without the discursive energy of reason and manners. The discursive energy, however, of reason itself does not move anything, except that which is for the sake of something, and is practical, since this has dominion over that which is effective. For every one who effects anything does it for the sake of something, and that which is effected is not simply the end, but is a relative, and pertains to something, though this is not the case with that which is practicable. For good conduct is the end of action, but appetite is directed to the end. Hence, deliberate choice is either orectic intellect, or appetite possessing a discursive energy, and man is a principle of this kind. Nothing, however, that has been done is an object of deliberate choice. Thus, for instance, no one deliberately chooses to subvert Troy. For neither does any one deliberate about what is past, but about that which is future and contingent. But it is not possible that what has been done should not be done. Hence, Agatho says rightly, All things to God are possible but one, that to undo which is already done. Of both the intellective parts, therefore, the work is truth. Hence, those habits according to which each of these parts enunciates the truth are the virtues of both. CHAPTER 3. Assuming, therefore, a more elevated exordium, let us again speak concerning these virtues. Let, therefore, the habits by which the soul enunciates truth in affirming or denying be 5 in number. But these are art, science, prudence, wisdom, and intellect. For it is possible that both hypolepsis and opinion may assert what is false. What science therefore is, will be from hence evident, if it is necessary to investigate accurately, and not to follow similitudes. For all of us are of opinion that it is not possible for that which we know scientifically to subsist otherwise than it does. But with respect to things which may subsist otherwise, of these, when they are out of our view, we are ignorant whether they exist or not. The object of scientific knowledge, therefore, is from necessity. Hence it is eternal. For all beings which are simply from necessity are eternal. But things eternal are without generation and incorruptible. Again, all science appears to be capable of being taught, and the object of scientific knowledge may be obtained by discipline. But all doctrine is produced from things previously known, as we have said in the Analytics. For it partly subsists through induction, and partly from syllogism. Induction, therefore, is indeed a principle, and the principle of universal, but syllogism is from universal. The principles, therefore, from which syllogism consists, are things of which there is no syllogism. Hence they are obtained by induction. Science, therefore, is indeed a demonstrative habit, and such other things as we have added to the definition of it in the Analytics. For when a man believes that a thing is after a certain manner, and the principles of it are known to him, he has a scientific knowledge of that thing. For if the principles are not more known to him than the conclusion, he will have a scientific knowledge from accident. Let these things, therefore, be admitted concerning science. CHAPTER 4. Of that, however, which may subsist otherwise than it does, or which has a various subsistence, and is contingent, there is something which is effective, and something which is practicable. But production and action differ. Credibility, however, may be obtained concerning these things from exoteric discussions, so that the practic habit, in conjunction with reason, is different from the effective, or productive habit in conjunction with reason. And neither are they contained by each other, for neither is action affection, nor is affection action. But since the building art is a habit effective in conjunction with reason, and neither is there any art which is not a habit effective in conjunction with reason, nor any such habit which is not art, art and habit effective in conjunction with true reason will be the same. All art, however, is conversant with generation, and machinates and contemplates in order that something may be produced which is capable either of existing or not existing, and of which the principle is in the maker, but not in the thing made. For art neither belongs to things which necessarily are, or are necessarily generated, nor to things which have a natural subsistence, for these contain in themselves the principle. Since, however, production and action are different, it is necessary that art should pertain to production, but not to action. And, after a certain manner, fortune and art are conversant with the same things, as also Agatho says, Art, fortune loves, and fortune, art. Art, therefore, as we have said, is a certain habit effective in conjunction with true reason. But the privation of art on the contrary, or the inartificial habit, is a habit effective in conjunction with false reason, about that which may have a various subsistence. CHAPTER V. With respect to prudence, we shall apprehend what it is, if we survey who those are whom we denominate prudent persons. It appears therefore to be the province of a prudent man to be able to consult well about things which are good and advantageous to him, not partially, as about what contributes to health or strength, but about what universally contributes to a happy life. But this is indicated by our calling men prudent about anything, when they reason well, with a view to some worthy end, in things in which there is no art. So that, in short, he who is adapted to consultation will be a prudent man. No one, however, consults about things which cannot subsist otherwise than they do, nor about things which it is impossible for him to perform. Hence, if science indeed subsists in conjunction with demonstration, but of those things of which the principles may have a various subsistence, of these there is no demonstration. For all these are contingent, and if it is not possible to consult about things which subsist from necessity, prudence will neither be science nor art. It will not be science, because that which is practicable may have a various subsistence. And it will not be art, because the genus of action is different from the genus of production. It remains therefore that it is a true habit in conjunction with reason, practical about human good and evil. For the end of production indeed is different from the production, but the end of action is not always different from action. Hence we are of opinion that Pericles and such like persons are prudent men, because they are able to survey what is good for themselves and for mankind. And we also think that economists and politicians are persons of this description. Hence also we call temperance by this name, as preserving prudence. But it preserves an opinion of this kind. For the delectable and the painful do not corrupt or distort every opinion, such as that a triangle has, or has not, angles equal to 2 right, but those opinions which pertain to what is practicable. For the principles indeed of practicable things are those things for the sake of which they are performed. But to him who is corrupted through pleasure or pain, the principle is not immediately apparent, nor does he perceive, that for the sake of this, and through this, it is necessary to choose and perform all things. For vice is destructive of the principle. Hence it is necessary that prudence should be a habit in conjunction with true reason, practical about human good. Moreover, of art indeed there is a virtue, but of prudence there is not. And in art, indeed, he who voluntarily errs is to be preferred to him who errs involuntarily. But in prudence, he who voluntarily errs is a subordinate character, in the same manner as in the virtues. It is evident, therefore, that prudence is a certain virtue, and not art. But since there are 2 parts of the rational soul, prudence will be the virtue of the doxastic part, or that part which forms opinions of things. For both opinion and prudence are conversant with that which may have a various subsistence. Nor yet is prudence a habit alone, in conjunction with reason, of which this is an indication, that there may be an oblivion of such a habit, i.e. it may be lost through oblivion, but there cannot be of prudence. CHAPTER VI. Since, however, science is an assent to universals, and things which have a necessary subsistence, but there are principles of things demonstrable, and of every science, for science is accompanied with reason. This being the case, there will neither be science nor art, nor prudence of the principle of the object of science. For the object of science is demonstrable, but art and prudence are conversant with things which may have a various subsistence. Neither, therefore, will wisdom be that through which this principle is known. For it is the province of a wise man to have demonstration about certain things. Hence, if the habits by which we enunciate the truth, and are never deceived about things which cannot, or which can have a various subsistence, are science and prudence, wisdom and intellect, but no one of these 3 can be the habit by which we know principles, but by the 3, I mean prudence, wisdom, and science, it remains that intellect is the habit by which principles are known. Chapter 7. We attribute, however, wisdom in the arts to those who are most accurately skilled in the arts. Thus we say that Phidias was a wise sculptor, and Polycletus a wise statuary. Here therefore we signify nothing else by wisdom, than that it is the virtue of art. But, in short, we think that certain persons are wise, not partially, and that they are not anything else than wise men. As Homer says in his Margites, The gods nor miner him, nor ploughman made, nor wise in anything beside. So that it is evident that wisdom will be the most accurate of the sciences. Hence it is necessary that the wise man should not only know those things which are inferred from principles, or the conclusions of scientific reasoning, but that he should also perceive and enunciate the truth about principles themselves. Wisdom, therefore, will be intellect and science, and will possess as a head or summit the science of the most honourable things, i.e. of divine natures. For it would be absurd for any one to fancy that the political science, or prudence, is a thing of all others the most excellent, unless man is the best of every thing the world contains. If, however, what is salubrious and good is to man one thing, and another to fishes, but that which is white, and that which is straight are always the same, all men will acknowledge that a wise man is the same, but the prudent man is a mutable character. For they will say that the being is prudent who surveys what is excellent in particulars according to the nature of each, and to him they will commit these particulars. Hence also they say that some brutes are prudent, viz. Such as appear to have a providential power about what pertains to their life. It is evident, however, that the political science and wisdom are not the same. For if it should be said that wisdom is that which is conversant with what is useful to mankind, there will be many kinds of wisdom. Since there is not one science which is conversant with the good of all animals, but a different science is conversant with a different good, unless indeed there is one medical science which extends to all beings. Nor is it of any consequence if it should be said that man is the most excellent of all other animals. For there are many animals naturally more divine than man, such as those most apparent beings from which the world is composed. From what has been said, therefore, it is evident that wisdom is the science and intellect of things most honourable by nature. Hence, the multitude say that Anaxagoras and Thales, and such like persons, were indeed wise, but not prudent men, in consequence of perceiving that they were ignorant of what was advantageous to them with respect to a corporeal life. And they say that they knew indeed things superfluous and admirable, difficult and divine, but which are useless, because they did not investigate human good. Prudence, however, is conversant with human affairs, and with those things which are the subjects of consultation. For we say that this is especially the work of a prudent man, to consult well. But no one consults about things which cannot subsist otherwise than they do, nor about things of which there is not a certain end, and this practical good. He, however, simply consults well, who conjectures, by a reasoning process, what is best to man among practicable things. Nor is prudence only directed to universals, but it is also necessary that it should know particulars. For it is practical, but action is conversant with particulars. Hence also, some persons who have only experimental knowledge without science are more adapted for practical affairs, than those who possess a scientific knowledge without experience. For he who knows that light flesh is easily concocted, but is ignorant what flesh is light, will not produce health. But he will rather produce it who knows that the flesh of birds is light and salubrious. Prudence, however, is practical, so that it is necessary to possess both, viz. A knowledge of what is to be done universally, and in particular circumstances, or rather the latter than the former. But prudence here also, i.e. among the practical powers, will be a certain architectonic power, or a power belonging to a master art. Chapter 8. The political science, however, and prudence are indeed the same habit, though they have not the same essence. But of the science pertaining to a city, the one part which is legislative, is as it were architectonic prudence. but the other, in the same manner as particulars, is denominated by a common name, the political science. This, however, is practical, and occupied in consultation. For a decree is a thing practicable, as the extreme. Hence those alone who possess the political science are said to act in a political capacity, for they alone act in the same manner as manual artificers. That also appears to be especially prudence, which a man employs about himself, and about one thing, and this is called by a common name, prudence. But of these species of prudence, the one is economy, another legislation, and another the political science. And of this last, one part pertains to consultation, but another is judicial. For a man, therefore, to know his own concerns, will be one species of knowledge. Nevertheless, it possesses a great difference. And he who knows things pertaining to himself, and is conversant with them, appears to be a prudent man. But those who apply themselves to the management of public affairs, are busily employed in a multitude of concerns. Hence also Euripides says, How can the name of wise to me belong, who might have mingled in the martial throng, unvexed with business, and exempt from care, taking of spoils my honourable share, yet chose by over-anxious thought to move the direful hate of all-commanding Jove. For these men explore what is good for themselves, and are of opinion that it is necessary to do this. From this opinion, therefore, it comes to pass that these men are prudent, though perhaps it is not possible for a man to know his own concerns without economic and political prudence. Again, how a man ought to manage his own affairs is a thing immanifest, and requires consideration. But, as an indication of the truth of what has been said, a youth may become a geometrician, and a mathematician, and may be skilled in things of this kind. But it does not appear that he will be prudent. The cause, however, of this is that prudence pertains to particulars, which become known from experience, but youth is without experience, which is produced by length of time. Since this also deserves to be considered, why a boy may become a mathematician, but cannot be wise, or a physiologist, shall we say it is because mathematical objects subsist by an oblation from matter, but the principles of the objects of wisdom and physiology are derived from experience? And with respect to metaphysical principles indeed, youth do not believe in, but admit them. But with respect to mathematical principles, it is not immanifest what they are. Farther still, error in consultation either pertains to universals or particulars. For, in order that a man may not drink heavy, and therefore bad water, it is requisite that he should know, either that all heavy water is bad, or that this particular water is heavy. But it is evident that prudence is not science, for it pertains to the extreme, as we have before observed, since that which is practicable is a thing of this kind. It is, therefore, indeed opposed to intellect, for intellect is conversant with terms, i.e. universals, which are the extremes upward, and above which there are no other principles. But prudence is conversant with the extremes downward, which are particulars, of which there is no science, but only a sensible perception. And this is not a sensible perception of peculiarities, but such as that by which we perceive in mathematics that a triangle is the extreme. For we stop there. It is, therefore, rather this sense which is prudence, but of that there is another species. Chapter 9. To investigate, however, and to consult differ. For to consult is to investigate something, but it is necessary to discuss good consultation, and show what it is, whether it is a certain science, or opinion, or good conjecture, or some other genus. It is not therefore science, for men do not investigate about things which they know. But good consultation is a certain consultation, and he who consults investigates and reasons. Neither is it good conjecture, for good conjecture is without reasoning, and is something which is accomplished with celerity, but men consult for a long time, and say that the objects of consultation ought to be performed rapidly, but that consultation should be done slowly. Again, sagacity and good consultation also differ from each other. But sagacity is a certain good conjecture. Neither therefore is any good consultation opinion. But since he who consults badly errs, but he who consults well consults rightly, it is evident that good consultation is a certain rectitude. Nor is good consultation either science or opinion. For of science, indeed, there is no rectitude, because there is no error. But truth is the rectitude of opinion. And at the same time, everything of which there is an opinion is definite and determined. Nevertheless, good consultation is not without reasoning. It falls short, therefore, of dianoia, or the discursive energy of reason. For this is not yet enunciation, since opinion is not investigation, but is now a certain enunciation. He, however, who consults, whether he consults well or ill, investigates something, and reasons. But good consultation is a certain rectitude of consultation, on which account it must in the first place be inquired what consultation is, and with what it is conversant. Since, however, rectitude is multifariously predicated, it is evident that not every rectitude is good consultation. For the incontinent and the bad man obtain from reasoning that which they propose to see, so that they will have consulted rightly, but have procured for themselves a great evil. But to have consulted well appears to be a certain good. For such a rectitude of consultation, as becomes the mean of obtaining good, is good consultation. Good, however, may be obtained by false reasoning, and a man indeed may obtain that which ought to be done, yet not through a proper medium, but the middle term may be false. Hence, neither will that be good consultation according to which that is obtained which ought to be obtained, yet not through a proper medium. Farther still, it is possible that one man may obtain the object of his wishes by consulting for a long time, but another by consulting rapidly. Hence, neither is that yet good consultation, but the rectitude which subsists according to utility, and to what is proper, and as and when it is proper. Again, it is possible simply to consult well, and also with a view to a certain end. Good consultation, therefore, simply is that which proceeds with rectitude to an end simply. But a certain good consultation is that which proceeds with rectitude to a certain end. Hence, if to consult well is the province of prudent men, good consultation will be a rectitude according to utility, with a view to a certain end, of which prudence is the true hypothesis. Chapter 10. Intelligence, however, and the privation of intelligence, according to which we denominate men intelligent or unintelligent, is neither wholly the same with science or opinion. For if it were, all men would be intelligent. Nor is intelligence some one of the particular sciences, such as medicine, for it would be conversant with health, or geometry, for it would be conversant with magnitudes. For neither is intelligence conversant with things which always are, and are immovable, nor with things which are passing into existence, but with those which may be the subject of doubt and consultation. Hence it is conversant with the same things as prudence. Yet intelligence and prudence are not the same. For prudence, indeed, is of a commanding nature. For the end of it is what ought or what ought not to be done. But intelligence is alone of a judiciary nature. For intelligence is the same as right intelligence, since intelligent men are also rightly intelligent. Intelligence, however, is neither the possession nor the acquisition of prudence. But as he who learns is said to understand what he learns, when he uses science, the like also takes place in the use of opinion in forming a judgment of those things with which prudence is conversant, and judging of them well, when another person is speaking. For what is well, is the same with what is beautifully done, and hence the name intelligence was derived, according to which men are said to be rightly intelligent, viz. From intelligence in learning. For we frequently use the verb to learn as equivalent to the verb to understand. Chapter 11. But what is called upright decision, according to which we say that men decide rightly, is the right judgment of the equitable man. As an indication of this, however, we say that the equitable man is especially inclined to pardon others, and that it is equitable to pardon certain things. But pardon is an upright judiciary decision of the equitable man. And the decision is upright which is made by a man observant of truth. All these habits, however, reasonably tend to the same thing. For we speak of upright decision, intelligence, prudence, and intellect with reference to the same persons, when we say that they are men of upright decision, are endued with intellect, are prudent and intelligent. For all these powers pertain to the extremes downward, and to particulars. And an intelligent man, and one who decides rightly, or a man disposed to pardon, will be one who possesses a judiciary power about things with which the prudent man is conversant. For things of an equitable nature are common to all good men, in their intercourse with others. Every thing, however, of a practicable nature pertains to particulars, and the downward extremes. For it is necessary that a prudent man should have a knowledge of these, and intelligence and equitable decision are conversant with things of a practicable nature, but these are extremes. And intellect pertains both to the upward and downward extremes. For intellect, and not the discursive energy of reason, is conversant with both first and last terms, i.e. with universal principles. The one indeed, i.e. the intellect, which is the principle of the demonstrative sciences, is conversant with immutable and first terms. But the intellect which is occupied in practical affairs, or which is the principle of prudence, is conversant with the extreme, and with that which is contingent, and the other proposition. For these are the principles of that for the sake of which a thing is done, or the final cause. For universal is from particulars. Of these therefore it is necessary to have a sensible perception, but this is the practical intellect. Hence, these habits appear to be natural, and no one indeed is wise by nature, but every one possesses naturally the power of deciding rightly, together with intelligence and intellect. But as an indication of this, we are of opinion that these habits are attendants on the ages of the life of men, and we say that this age, i.e. old age, possesses intellect and upright decision, as if nature were the cause of this. Hence, also, intellect is both the principle and the end. For from these demonstrations are framed, and with these they are conversant. Hence, in practical affairs, it is no less necessary to attend to the undemonstrated assertions and opinions of elderly or prudent men, than to demonstrations. For, in consequence of possessing an eye from experience, they perceive the principles of things of a practicable nature. And thus we have shown what wisdom and prudence are, and with what particulars each is conversant, and that each is the virtue of a different part of the soul. Chapter 12. Some one, however, may doubt concerning these, in what their utility consists. For wisdom, indeed, contemplates none of those things from which men will obtain felicity, since it is not conversant with any thing which is in generation, or which is becoming to be, or passing into existence. But prudence, indeed, does consider those things from which human felicity is derived. Yet on what account is it necessary that it should, since prudence is conversant with just and beautiful things, and which are good to man? We do not, however, become at all more practically virtuous by knowing these things, since the virtues are habits, as neither are things said to be salubrious, or to conduce to a good habit of body, because they have an active power, but because they proceed from habit. For we are not at all more practical from possessing the medical or gymnastic art. But if a man is not to be considered as prudent for the sake of these things, but for the sake of becoming worthy, they will not be at all useful to those who are worthy. Again, neither will prudence be useful to those who are not worthy. For it is of no consequence whether they are prudent, or are persuaded by others that are, since this will be sufficient, in the same manner as in what pertains to health. For when we wish to be well, we do not at the same time learn the medical art. To which we may add, that it will appear to be absurd, that prudence, which is subordinate to wisdom, should possess a greater authority, for that which is effective governs and presides in everything. These things, therefore, must be discussed, for now the doubt is concerning them alone. In the first place, therefore, we say that these virtues, wisdom and prudence, are necessarily eligible per se, since they are the virtues of each part of the soul, though neither of them should effect anything. In the next place, they do indeed effect something, yet not in the same manner as medicine produces health, but as health produces the energies of a good habit of body. Thus also wisdom produces felicity. For, being a part of the whole of virtue, by the possession and the energy of it, it renders a man happy. Farther still, the work is accomplished by prudence and ethical virtue. For virtue renders the scope proposed by the agent right, but prudence gives rectitude to things which tend to the scope. A virtue, however, of this kind does not belong to the fourth, or nutritive part of the soul, because its energies are not in our power, nor are rational, either essentially or by participation. But with respect to our not being at all more adapted to the practice of things beautiful and just, through prudence, in answer to this objection, we must begin a little higher, assuming the following principle. For, as we say that certain persons who perform just things are not yet just, such as those who do what is ordered by the laws, either unwillingly, or from ignorance, or from some other cause, and not on account of the things themselves, though they do those things which ought to be done, and such as a worthy man ought to do. Thus also, as it seems, it is possible to do every thing with a certain disposition of mind, so as to be a good man. I mean, for instance, that it is possible to do every thing with which virtue is concerned, from deliberate choice, and for the sake of the things which are done. Virtue, therefore, produces a right deliberate choice, but it is not the business of virtue, but of some other power, to render the deliberate choice disposed to embrace what truly contributes to the end. It is requisite, however, to speak more clearly on this subject. There is, therefore, a certain power which is called skill, but this is a power of such a kind, that by its assistance those things may be performed and obtained which contribute to the proposed scope. And if, indeed, the scope is beautiful, this power is laudable, but if the scope is bad, this power becomes craft, on which account also we say that prudent men are skillful, and not crafty. Prudence, however, is not this power, yet does not subsist without it. But habit is not acquired by this eye of the soul without virtue, as we have said and is evident. For the syllogisms of practical affairs rank as a principle, since the end is a thing of this kind, and that which is best, whatever it may be. Let the end, for instance, be something casual, but this is not apparent except to a good man. For depravity distorts the judgment, and produces deception about the practical principles. Hence it is evident that it is impossible for any one to be a prudent, unless he is a good man. Chapter 13. Again, therefore, let us direct our attention to virtue. For as prudence is not the same, indeed, but is similar to sagacity, thus also natural virtue subsists similarly, with reference to that which is properly so called. For the several manners appear to all men to subsist in a certain respect naturally, since we are just and temperate and brave and possess the other virtues immediately from our birth. At the same time, however, we investigate something else, as that which is properly good, and are of opinion that such like virtues are inherent after another manner. For the physical habits are inherent in children and brutes, but they are seen to be noxious without intellect. Thus much indeed is apparent, that as it happens that a strong body, which is moved without sight, very much errs in its motions, in consequence of being deprived of sight, this, likewise, is the case here, with respect to the physical virtues. But if the possessor of these virtues obtains intellect also, he will excel in his actions. The habit, however, being similar, will then be properly virtue. Hence, as in the doxastic part of the soul, or that part which is characterized by opinion, there are two species, skill and prudence. Thus also, in the ethical part there are two species, one of which is physical virtue, but the other is virtue properly so called. And of these, virtue properly so called is not without prudence. Hence it is said that all the virtues are prudence. And Socrates, indeed, investigated partly with rectitude and partly with error. For because he thought that all the virtues are prudences, he erred. But it is well said by him, that the virtues are not without prudence. But as an indication of this, all men now, when they define virtue, add to the definition habit. and that they energize according to right reason. And right reason is that which subsists according to prudence. All men, therefore, appear in a certain respect to prophesy that a habit of this kind, which subsists according to prudence, is virtue. It is necessary, however, to change in a small degree the definition, for not only a habit according to right reason, but also a habit in conjunction with right reason, is virtue. But prudence is right reason energizing about things of this kind. Socrates therefore thought that the virtues indeed were reasons, because all of them are sciences. But we think that they subsist in conjunction with reason. Hence it is evident from what has been said that it is not possible to be a good man properly without prudence, nor a prudent man without ethical virtue. After this manner also the reasoning may be dissolved, by which some one may contend that the virtues are separated from each other. For the same person is not naturally well adapted to all the virtues. Hence he has now obtained this, but not yet that virtue. For this may, indeed, happen according to the physical virtues, but is not possible in those virtues, according to which a man is said to be simply a good man. For all the virtues are present at the same time that prudence, which is one virtue, is present. But it is evident that though prudence were not a practical thing, it would be necessary, because it is the virtue of a part of the soul, and because deliberate choice will not be right without prudence, nor without virtue. For one of these is the end, but the other causes us to do things which contribute to the end. Prudence, however, neither has dominion over wisdom, nor over the better part of the soul, as neither has the medical science dominion over health. For it does not use health, but considers how it may be obtained. It prescribes, therefore, for the sake of health, but has no dominion over it. Again, to say that prudence rules over wisdom is just as if some one should say that the political science rules over the gods, because it orders everything which is done in the city. End of Book 6. Chapter 1. After these things, making another beginning, it must be observed by us that there are three species of things which are to be avoided in manners, viz., vice, incontinence, and brutality. But the contraries to two of these are indeed evident. For we call one of the contraries virtue, and the other continence. To brutality, however, it will be most appropriate to say that the virtue is opposed, which is a certain heroical and divine virtue, as Homer represents Priam saying of Hector that he was a very good man. Wretch that I am, my bravest offspring slain, you the disgrace of Priam's house remain. Mestor the brave, renowned in ranks of war, with Troilus, dreadful in his rushing car. And last, great Hector, more than man divine, for sure he seemed not of terrestrial line. Hence, if, as it is said, men from being men become gods, through excess of virtue, the habit which is opposed to a brutal habit, will, indeed, be such as this. For as there is neither the vice nor virtue of a brute, so neither is there of a god. But the one habit, indeed, is more honourable than virtue, and the other is of a different genus from vice. Since, however, the existence of a divine man is rare, (just as the Lacedaemonians, when they very much admire a man, are accustomed to say, O divine man), thus also the brutal nature is rare among men, but when it does exist, it is principally found among the barbarians. Some men, however, become brutalized through diseases and mutilations of the body. And we thus denominate, by a defamatory appellation, those who surpass other men in vice. But of such a disposition of the soul as this, we shall hereafter make mention. And we have before spoken concerning vice. Let us now, therefore, speak concerning incontinence, and effeminacy, and luxury, and concerning their opposites, continence and endurance. For each of these must not be considered as if they were the same habits with virtue and vice, nor yet as if they were of a genus different from them. It is necessary, however, as we have done in other things, having first premised what is apparent, i.e. what is commonly admitted as true, and proposed doubts, in the next place to show every thing which is especially probable about these passions, but if not every thing, at least the greater part, and the principal. For if such doubts as are difficult are dissolved, and those things which are probable are left, we shall have sufficiently accomplished our purpose. Continence, therefore, and endurance appear to be among the number of worthy and laudable things, but incontinence and effeminacy among the number of things bad and blameable. And the continent man, and he who abides in the decision of reason, are the same person. And the incontinent man is the same with him who departs from the decision of reason. And the incontinent man, indeed, knowing that the things are bad, does them through passion, but the continent man, knowing that desires are bad, does not follow them, in consequence of being obedient to reason. And all men, indeed, admit that the temperate man is continent, and possesses the virtue of endurance. But with respect to a man of this description, some say that he is in every respect temperate, but others say that he is not. And some confusedly say that the intemperate man is incontinent, and the incontinent man is intemperate, but others say that they differ from each other. But with respect to the prudent man, sometimes they say that he cannot be incontinent, and sometimes that certain persons who are prudent and skilful are incontinent. And farther still, men are said to be incontinent of anger, of honour, and of gain. Such therefore are the assertions concerning continence and incontinence. CHAPTER 2. It may, however, be doubted how he who thinks rightly can act incontinently. Some say, therefore, that it is impossible for a man to act incontinently who knows that he ought not. For it would be a dreadful thing, when science is inherent, as Socrates thought, that anything else should have dominion, and draw the man about like a slave. For Socrates, in short, opposed reason by this opinion, as if there were no such thing as incontinence, since he said that no one acted contrary to what he apprehended it was best to do, except from ignorance of what was best. This assertion, therefore, is adverse to those things which are clearly apparent, and it is requisite to inquire concerning the passion, if any one acts incontinently through ignorance, what the mode of this ignorance is. For it is evident that he who acts incontinently does not think he ought so to act, till he is under the influence of the passion. There are, however, certain persons who admit some of these things, but not others. For they grant, indeed, that nothing is better than science, but they do not admit that no one acts contrary to what appears to him to be better. And on this account they say, that the incontinent man, not having science, but opinion, is vanquished by pleasures. If, however, it is opinion, and neither science, nor a strong, but a weak hypolepsis which resists, as it is in those who are dubious, pardon is to be granted to him who yields to strong desires. But improbity is not to be pardoned, nor anything else which is blameable. The incontinent man, therefore, is vanquished by desire, prudence at the same time resisting, for this is most strong. But this is absurd, for the same person will be, at the same time, prudent and incontinent. No one, however, will say that it is the province of a prudent man to perform voluntarily the most base actions. To which may be added, what we have before shown, that the prudent is a practical man, for he is conversant with particulars, and possesses the other virtues. Again, if the continent man consists in having strong and base desires, the temperate man will not be a continent man, nor the continent a temperate man. For it is not the province of the temperate man to have too much desire, or to have base desires, but it would be requisite that he should, if this were admitted. For if, indeed, the desires are good, the habit which prevents a man from following them is bad, so that not all continence will be good. If, however, the desires are weak, but not bad, there is nothing venerable in continence, and if they are bad and weak, there is nothing great in it. Farther still, if continence gives permanency to every opinion, and even to false opinion, it is a bad thing, and if incontinence produces a departure from every opinion, there will be a certain incontinence which is good, such as that of Neoptolemus in the Philoctetes of Sophocles. For he is to be praised for not persevering in what he was persuaded to do by Ulysses, because it was painful to him to lie. Again, that reasoning of the Sophists, which is denominated lying, or dissembling, is perplexed with doubt. For with these men, in consequence of wishing to produce an assent to paradoxes, in order that, when they obtain their end, they may appear to be skilful persons, the syllogism formed by their reasoning becomes very dubious. For the discursive energy of reason is bound, when the person whose assent they wish to procure is unwilling to persist, because the conclusion does not please him, but is unable to proceed because he cannot dissolve the argument. From a certain reason, however, it may happen, that imprudence, together with incontinence, is a virtue. For a man, through incontinence, may do the contrary to what he apprehends ought to be done. But he apprehends that good things are evil, and that they ought not to be done. Hence, he will do what is good, and not what is evil. Again, he who performs and pursues what is delectable, in consequence of being persuaded, and deliberately choosing so to do, will appear to be a better character than the man who does so, not from reasoning, but from incontinence. For he may be more easily cured, because he may be induced to change his opinion. But the incontinent man is obnoxious to the proverb, in which we say, "When water suffocates, what occasion is there to drink?" For if, indeed, he were persuaded to do what he did, if he had been induced to change his opinion, he would have desisted. But now, not being persuaded, he nevertheless acts in this manner. Farther still, if incontinence and continence are conversant with all things, who is the man that is simply incontinent? For no one has every species of incontinence, and we say that some persons are simply incontinent. Such therefore are the doubts which happen on this subject. But of these, it is necessary to take away some, and to leave others, for the solution of a doubt is the discovery of what is investigated. Chapter 3. In the first place, therefore, it must be considered, whether the incontinent act knowingly or not, and in what manner they act knowingly. In the next place, with what kind of things the incontinent and the continent man are conversant. I mean, whether they are conversant with all pleasure and pain, or with certain definite pleasures and pains, and whether the continent and the enduring man are the same, or different characters. And in a similar manner we must consider such other things as are allied to this theory. The beginning, however, of the speculation is, whether the continent and incontinent man differ in the things with which they are conversant, or in the mode in which they are conversant with them. My meaning is this, whether the incontinent man is alone incontinent, or not, because he is conversant with these particular things, or whether it is because he is thus affected, or not, or whether it is from both of these. In the next place, whether incontinence and continence are conversant with all things, or not. For he who is simply incontinent is not conversant with all things, but with those things with which the intemperate man is conversant. Nor is he denominated incontinent, from being simply affected towards these, for if he were, incontinence would be the same with intemperance, but from being affected towards them in this particular manner. For the intemperate man indeed is led by his desires from deliberate choice, thinking that it is always necessary to pursue the present delight, But the incontinent man does not think this is necessary, yet pursues it. With respect, therefore, to the assertion that it is true opinion and not science through which men act incontinently, it is of no consequence to the present discussion. For some of those who form opinions of things entertain no doubt of their truth, but think that they know accurately. If, therefore, those who form an opinion act in a greater degree contrary to their opinion than those who have a scientific knowledge, because they believe negligently, science will in no respect differ from opinion. For some persons believe no less firmly in things of which they form an opinion, than others in things which they know scientifically. But this is evident from Heraclitus. Since, however, we say that a man knows scientifically in a twofold respect, for both he who possesses science indeed, but does not use it, and he who uses it, are said to have scientific knowledge, it makes a difference whether a man possessing science, but not contemplating, does what he ought not to do, or whether possessing science and contemplating he acts improperly. For this appears to be absurd, but it is not if he does not contemplate. Again, since there are two modes of propositions, i.e. universal and particular propositions, nothing hinders but that he who possesses both these may act contrary to science, using indeed the universal proposition, but not the particular one, for particulars are practicable. There is a difference, also, as to the universal, for one difference, indeed, is in the man himself, but the other is in the thing. Thus, for instance, a man may know that dry food is beneficial to every man, and that this person is a man, or that a thing of such a kind is dry food. But whether this is a thing of such a kind, he either does not know, or he does not energize as if he did know. There is an immense difference, therefore, according to these modes, so that no absurdity follows, for a man thus to know, but for him to know in any other way it would be wonderful. Farther still, science may be inherent in men in a way different from that which we have just now mentioned. For we see that habit differs in possessing, indeed, but not using science, so that a man possesses, in a certain respect, and does not possess science, as is the case with him who is asleep, or insane, or intoxicated. But in this way men are disposed, who are under the influence of the passions, for anger, and the desire of venereal pleasures, and certain other things of this kind, evidently produce a change in the body, and in some persons also they produce insanity. It is manifest, therefore, that the incontinent man must be said to be affected similarly to these persons. Nor is it any indication of the contrary, if such persons utter sentences which are the progeny of science. For those who are under the influence of these passions will recite demonstrations, and the verses of Empedocles. And those who first learn a science connect indeed the words, but do not yet know their meaning. For it is necessary that science should increase with advancing age, but this requires time. Hence it must be admitted that the incontinent speak after the manner of players, i.e. without attending to the meaning of what they say. Again, the cause of this may also be physically surveyed as follows. Opinion, indeed, is either universal or particular, of which latter, sense is now the mistress. But when one reason is produced from both these, it is necessary that, so far as pertains to theory, the soul should enunciate the conclusion, but so far as pertains to practice, should immediately act. Thus, for instance, if every sweet thing ought to be tasted, but this thing is sweet, as being some one of particulars, it necessarily follows that he who is able, and is not impeded, must at the same time that he says this, act, i.e. taste the sweet thing. When, therefore, the universal proposition is indeed inherent, which prohibits a thing from being tasted, but another proposition says, that every thing which is sweet is delectable, and another, that this particular thing is sweet, and this causes the man to energize, and when, also, desire happens to be inherent, then the universal proposition, indeed, says this thing is to be avoided, but desire leads to the fruition of it. For each of the parts of the soul is able to move, or excite. Hence it happens that a man acts incontinently, both from reason, in a certain respect, and opinion. Though opinion is not essentially, but from accident contrary to reason. For desire, but not opinion, is contrary to right reason. Hence, on this account, also, brutes are not incontinent, because they have not a perception of universal, but an imagination and memory of particulars. With respect to the manner, however, in which ignorance is dissolved, and the incontinent man again becomes in possession of scientific knowledge, the reasoning is the same as concerning him who is intoxicated or asleep, and is not peculiar to this passion, but the explanation of it must be obtained from physiologists. Because, however, the last proposition is the opinion of the sensible object, and is the mistress of actions. He who is under the influence of passion either has not this proposition, or he has it in such a way, that from possessing he has not a scientific knowledge of it, but merely enunciates it, just as he who is intoxicated recites the verses of Empedocles, and likewise because the last proposition is not universal, and does not appear to be similarly scientific with the proposition which is universal. That also which Socrates investigated appears in this case to happen. For the passion is not produced when that which is science, properly so called, is seen to be present, nor is this science drawn about, so as to cooperate with passion, but this must be asserted of the sensitive power. And thus much concerning the knowledge and ignorance of the incontinent man, and how he may act incontinently, accompanied with knowledge. Chapter 4. But whether any one is simply incontinent, or all that are incontinent are partially so, and if there is any one who is simply incontinent, what the things are with which he is conversant, must in the next place be shown by us. That the continent therefore and men of endurance, and the incontinent and effeminate, are conversant with pleasures and pains, is evident. Of those things, however, which produce pleasure, some indeed are necessary, but others, though they are eligible of themselves, yet have excess. But necessaries, indeed, are things which have reference to the body. I mean such things as pertain to food, and the use of venereal pleasures, and such like corporeal concerns, about which we place intemperance, and temperance. Other things, however, are not indeed necessary, yet are eligible of themselves. I mean such as victory, honour, wealth, and such like good and delectable things. Those therefore who exceed in these contrary to the right reason which is in them, we do not indeed denominate simply incontinent, but with an addition we call them incontinent of riches, of gain, of honour, and of anger, but we do not call them simply incontinent, as being different from those that are so, and denominated from similitude, just as the name of a certain person who was victorious in the Olympic games was Anthropos, i.e. man, for he had as a proper the common name of man, and yet at the same time he was different from man universal, or the species man, as being an individual. As an indication of this, incontinence indeed is blamed not only as an error, but also as a certain vice, either simply or partially. But no one blames those who are incontinent of honour, or gain, etc., as simply bad. With respect, however, to those who are conversant with corporeal enjoyments, with which we say the temperate and intemperate man are conversant, he who without deliberate choice pursues the excesses of delectable, and avoids the excesses of painful things, viz. Hunger and thirst, heat and cold, and every thing pertaining to the touch and the taste, yet contrary to deliberate choice and the reasoning power, is called incontinent, not with an addition of this or that thing, as of anger, but he is only simply called incontinent. But as an indication of this, those who are conversant with the one are called effeminate, but not those who are conversant with the other. Hence, we arrange the incontinent and intemperate, and also the continent and temperate man, in the same class, but not those who are incontinent of honour, or gain, etc. Because they are, in a certain respect, conversant with the same pleasures and pains. Though, however, they are conversant with the same things, yet not after the same manner. For the intemperate, indeed, pursue depraved pleasures, from deliberate choice, but the incontinent do not. Hence, we rather call him intemperate, who either not at all desiring, or desiring slightly, pursues excessive pleasures, and avoids moderate pains, than him who pursues the one, and avoids the other in consequence of being influenced by vehement desire. For what would the former character do if he were impelled by robust desire, and suffered violent pain from the want of necessary things? Since, however, of desires and pleasures, some rank in the genus of things beautiful and worthy, for of things delectable, some are naturally eligible, others are contrary to these, and others have an intermediate subsistence, agreeably to the division we have before made, and these last are, such as riches, gain, victory, and honour. In all these, therefore, and things of the like kind, and in those that have an intermediate subsistence, men are not blamed for being merely influenced by the passions, and for desiring and loving, but for the manner in which they are influenced by them, and for indulging them to excess. Hence, with respect to those who are vanquished by the passions, or pursue anything naturally beautiful and good, contrary to reason, such as those who pursue honour more than is proper, or are irrationally attached to their parents and children, for these also rank among the number of things that are good, and those who pay attention to these are praised, yet there is at the same time a certain excess even in these things. If any one, like Niobe, contends about them even with the gods, or like Satyrus, who for his attachment to his father was called Philopator, for he appeared through this attachment to be very infatuated. There is, therefore, no depravity, indeed, in these things, for the reason already assigned, because each of these things is naturally eligible of itself, but the excesses of them are bad, and are to be avoided. This, however, is not the case with incontinence, for incontinence is not only to be avoided, but is also among the number of blamable things. But from the similitude of the passion, in speaking about each of these, it is usual to add the term incontinence, just as we say, that a man is a bad physician, or a bad player, whom we should not simply call a bad man. As, therefore, we do not here call these simply bad men, because each of these is not a vice, but similar to vice from analogy, so likewise there, viz. In the immoderate pursuit of honour, gain, etc., those things only are to be considered as incontinence and continence, which are conversant with the same things as temperance and intemperance. But with respect to incontinence and anger, we speak of it from similitude. Hence also, by making an addition, we say that a man is incontinent of anger, just as we say that he is incontinent of honour or gain. Chapter 5. Since, however, some things are naturally delectable, and of these some are simply so, but others to the genera of animals and men, but other things are not naturally delectable, but some things are pleasing in consequence of mutilations, and others are so, partly from custom, and partly from depraved natures. This being the case, similar habits may be perceived in each of these. But by savage habits I mean such a habit as that of the woman who is said to have cut open the bellies of pregnant women, and to have devoured the fetus. Or such habits as certain savage nations about Pontus are said to possess, for of these some are delighted to feed on raw, and others on human flesh, and others at banquets feast each other with their own children. Or such a habit as Phalaris is said to have possessed, for he is reported to have eaten his own son. These habits, therefore, are savage. Some of these habits, however, are produced in certain persons from disease and insanity, as was the case with him who immolated and ate his mother, and also with him who ate the liver of his fellow servant. But other savage habits either originate from disease, or from custom, such as evulsions of the hairs, biting the nails, and besides these, eating coals and earth, to which may be added the venereal connexion of males with males. For these habits are produced in some persons by nature, but in others from custom, as being accustomed to them from childhood. No one, therefore, would call those in whom nature is the cause of these habits incontinent, as neither are women called incontinent, because in the venereal connexion they are not active, but passive. And in a similar manner, those are not called incontinent, who are in a diseased condition from custom. The possession, therefore, of each of these is something beyond the boundaries of vice, in the same manner as a savage nature. But when possessing these propensities to subdue or be subdued by them, is not simple continence or incontinence, but is only so from similitude, just as he who subsists after this manner with respect to anger is incontinent of this passion, but passion is not to be called incontinent. For every vice, folly, timidity, intemperance, and ferocity, when excessive, is either savage or the effect of disease. For he who is naturally so disposed as to be afraid of everything, even though a mouse should make a noise, is timid according to a savage timidity, but he who is afraid of a cat is timid from disease. And among the number of the stupid, those who are most irrational from nature, and live only from sense, resemble savage animals, as is the case with some nations of remote barbarians. But those who are so from disease, such as epilepsy, or insanity, these are in a morbid state. It is, however, possible that some one may sometimes possess these habits, and yet not be vanquished by them. I mean as if, for instance, Phalaris, desiring to eat his son, should refrain from so doing, or should abstain from absurd venereal pleasure. And it is not only possible to have these propensities, but also to be vanquished by them. As therefore, with respect to depravity, that which pertains to a man is simply said to be depravity, but that which subsists with an addition is said to be a savage or diseased depravity, but is not simple depravity. After the same manner, with respect to incontinence, it is evident that one kind is savage, but another the effect of disease, while that alone is simply incontinence which subsists according to human intemperance. It is evident, therefore, that incontinence and continence are alone conversant with those things with which intemperance and temperance are conversant, and that another species of incontinence subsists about other things, which is denominated metaphorically, and not simply. Chapter 6. Let us, however, now consider whether the incontinence of anger is not less base than the incontinence of desires. For anger, indeed, seems to hear something of reason, but to hear it negligently, just like hasty servants, who run away before they have heard the whole of what is said to them, and thus err in the performance of what they are ordered to do, or like dogs who bark at a noise alone, before they perceive whether he who makes it is a friend or not. Thus also anger, through the heat and celerity of its nature, hears indeed reason, but does not hear its mandates, in consequence of impetuously tending to vengeance. For reason, indeed, or the imagination, renders it evident that something has been done attended with insolence or contempt. But anger, as if syllogistically concluding that it is necessary to be hostile to one who has acted in this manner, is immediately enraged. Desire, however, if sense or reason corrupted by sense, only says that a thing is delectable, rushes to the enjoyment of it. Hence anger in a certain respect follows reason, but desire does not. Desire therefore is more base than anger. For he who is incontinent of anger is after a manner vanquished by reason, but he who is incontinent of desire is subdued by desire, and not by reason. Again, it is more pardonable to follow the natural appetites, since such desires as are common to all men are more pardonable, and so far as they are common. But anger and asperity are more natural than desires which are excessive, and which are not necessary. Thus one who was accused of striking his father said, as an apology for it, that his own father, and even his grandfather, committed the same fault. And pointing to his child, he likewise said, he will strike me when he becomes a man, for this is a family failing. A certain person, also, being dragged about by his son, ordered him to stop at the gates of his house, for he likewise had dragged his father as far as to that place. Farther still, those who act more insidiously are more unjust. The irascible man, therefore, is not insidious, nor is anger, but he is open in what he does. Desire, however, is fraudulent, as it is said of Venus, the Cyprian goddess skilled in weaving wiles. And, as Homer says, speaking of her cestus, in this was every art and every charm, to win the wisest and the coldest warm, fond love, the gentle vow, the gay desire, the kind deceit, the still reviving fire, persuasive speech, and more persuasive sighs, silence that spoke, and eloquence of eyes. Hence, if this incontinence is more unjust, it is also more base than that which pertains to anger, and this is simply incontinence, and in a certain respect vice. Again, no one who is pained acts insolently, i.e. lasciviously, towards another person, but every one who acts from the impulse of anger acts with pain. He, however, who conducts himself insolently towards another acts with pleasure. If, therefore, those things with which it is especially just to be angry are more unjust, the incontinence also which subsists through desire is more unjust, for anger is not attended with insolence. Hence it is evident that the incontinence which is conversant with desires is more base than that which is conversant with anger, and, also, that continence and incontinence are conversant with corporeal pleasures. The differences, however, of these must be assumed. For, as we said in the beginning, some desires are human and natural, both in their genus and magnitude, but others are savage, and others subsist from mutilations and diseases. But with the first of these, temperance and intemperance are alone conversant. Hence, we neither call brutes temperate, nor intemperate, except metaphorically, though one genus of animals differs in short from another, in insolence, in salaciousness, and in voracity. For they have neither any deliberate choice, nor reasoning process, but they revolt from nature, in the same manner as insane men. Ferocity, however, is a less evil than vice, but it is more terrible, for that which is most excellent is not corrupted through this, as it is in men, but those that labour under this malady are deprived of it, i.e. of reason. It is just, therefore, as if that which is inanimate should be compared with that which is animated, in order to know which of the two is the worse. For the improbity is always more innoxious which is without a principle, but intellect is a principle. Hence a similar thing takes place, as if injustice should be compared with an unjust man. For it is possible that the one may be worse than the other, for a bad man may be the cause of an infinitely greater number of evils than a brute. CHAPTER VII. With respect, however, to the pleasures and pains which subsist through the touch and the taste, and also with respect to the desires and aversions pertaining to these, about which intemperance and temperance have been before defined, it is possible, indeed, that a man may be so disposed as to be vanquished by those pleasures and pains, to which the multitude are superior, and it is also possible that he may vanquish those by which the multitude are vanquished. But of these characters, he who is vanquished by pleasures is incontinent, and he who vanquishes them is continent. He also who is vanquished by pains is effeminate, but he who vanquishes them is a man of endurance. The habits, however, of most men are between these, though they rather verge to the worse habits. Since, however, of pleasures some are necessary, but others are not, and those that are necessary are so to a certain extent. But the excesses and defects are not necessary, and the like also takes place in desires and pains. This being the case, he who pursues the excesses of pleasures, or who pursues pleasures excessively, or from deliberate choice, and on their own account, and not from anything else which may happen, is an intemperate man. For this man will necessarily not repent of his conduct, so that he is incurable. But he who is deficient in the pursuit of pleasures is opposed to this character, and he who subsists in a medium between both is the temperate man. In a similar manner also he is intemperate who avoids corporeal pains, not because he is vanquished by them, but from deliberate choice. But of those who pursue pleasures, yet not from deliberate choice, one, indeed, is led to the pursuit through pleasure, but another through an avoidance of pain, so that they differ from each other. It will, however, be obvious to everyone that he is a worse character, who, not desiring, or desiring but slightly, does anything which is base, than him who desires vehemently. And also that he who not being angry strikes a man, is a worse character than the man who strikes another through the impulse of anger. For what would such a one do, if he were influenced by passion? Hence the intemperate is worse than the incontinent man. Of the characters, therefore, that we have mentioned, the one has more the form of effeminacy, but the other is incontinent. But the continent is opposed to the incontinent, and the man of endurance to the effeminate man. For endurance, indeed, consists in resisting, but continence in subduing. It is one thing, however, to resist, and another to subdue, just as it is one thing not to be vanquished, and another to vanquish. Hence, continence is more eligible than endurance. But he who fails in those things in which the multitude resist, and are able to resist, is effeminate, and luxuriously delicate. For luxurious delicacy is a certain effeminacy, as when a man draws his garments on the ground, lest he should be pained by the labour of holding it up, and, by his manner of living, imitates one who is ill, yet does not think he is miserable, though he resembles one who is miserable. The like also takes place with respect to continence and incontinence. For it is not wonderful if a man is vanquished by strong and transcendent pleasures, or pains, but he deserves to be pardoned, if, though vanquished, he makes a resistance, like the Philoctetes of Theoctetes, when bit by a viper, or the Circean of Carcinus in his Alope, or like those who, endeavouring to restrain their laughter, burst forth into a profuse laugh, as it happened to Xenophantus. But he is very blamable who is vanquished by those pleasures which the multitude are able to resist, and is unable to oppose them, and this not through the nature of his race, or from disease, as is the case with the Persian kings, with whom effeminacy is hereditary, and who on this account are as females when compared to males. The jocose man, also, appears to be intemperate, but he is effeminate, for jesting is a relaxation, since it is a repose, from serious and laborious pursuits. But the jocose man ranks among the number of those who exceed in this relaxation. With respect to incontinence, however, one kind is precipitate, but another is from imbecility. For some indeed, having deliberated, do not persist in what they have deliberated, on account of passion, but others, in consequence of not having deliberated, are led captive by passion. For some persons, just as those who have previously tickled themselves are not tickled by others, so these in consequence of previously perceiving and foreseeing the future perturbation, and having pre-excited themselves, and their reasoning power, are not vanquished by passion, whether it be delectable or painful. But persons of acute feelings, and those who are melancholy, are especially incontinent, according to precipitate incontinence. For the former indeed through celerity, and the latter through vehemence, do not wait for the decision of reason, because they are disposed to follow the imagination. Chapter 8. The intemperate man, however, as we have before observed, is not inclined to repentance, for he persists in his deliberate choice. But every incontinent man is inclined to repent. Hence, the thing is not as we doubted it might be. But the intemperate man, indeed, is incurable, and the incontinent man is curable. For depravity appears to resemble the diseases of the dropsy and consumption, but incontinence seems to resemble the epilepsy. Since the former, indeed, is continued without interruption, but the latter is not a continued improbity. And in short, the genus of incontinence is different from that of vice. For vice indeed is latent, but incontinence is not latent. But of these characters, the precipitately incontinent are better than those who possess reason, indeed, but do not abide in its decisions. For the latter are vanquished by a less passion, and not without previous deliberation, like the former. For the man who is incontinent from imbecility resembles those who become rapidly intoxicated, and from a little wine, and from less than that through which most men become intoxicated. That incontinence, therefore, is not a vice is evident, but perhaps it is partially so. For incontinence is contrary, but vice is conformable to deliberate choice. The intemperate and the incontinent man, however, are similar in their actions, just as Demodocus said of the Milesians, viz. The Milesians are not indeed foolish, yet they act as if they were so. Thus, also, incontinent men are not indeed unjust, yet they act unjustly. Since therefore the incontinent man is one who does not pursue corporeal pleasures in excess and contrary to right reason, from persuasion, but the intemperate man, because he is intemperate, is persuaded to pursue such pleasures. This being the case, the former is easily induced to change his opinion, but the latter is not. For virtue preserves the principle of right conduct, but depravity corrupts it. And in actions, that for the sake of which, or the end is the principle, in the same manner as hypotheses are principles in the mathematics. Hence, neither in the mathematics, nor here, are principles to be taught, but virtue, either physical or ethical, is the cause of right opinion, concerning the principle of conduct. A man of this description, therefore, is temperate, but the contrary character is an intemperate man. There is also a certain person, who through passion departs from right reason, whom passion, indeed, so subdues that he does not act conformably to right reason, but yet passion does not so far subdue him as to cause him to be persuaded, that pleasures of this description ought to be largely pursued. This person is the incontinent man, who is better than the intemperate, and is not absolutely a bad man. For in him that which is best, the principle of right conduct, is saved. But there is another person contrary to this, viz. The continent man, who persists in the decision of reason, and is not diverted from it through passion. From these things, therefore, it is evident, that one of these habits is worthy, but the other bad. Chapter 9. Whether therefore is he the continent man, who persists in any kind of reason, and in any kind of deliberate choice, or he who persists in right reason? And whether is he the incontinent man, who does not persist in any kind of deliberate choice, nor in any kind of reason, or he who persists in a false reason, and in an erroneous deliberate choice, as it was doubted by us before? Or shall we say that the continent man is one who persists from accident in any kind of reason and deliberate choice, but essentially in true reason, and right deliberate choice, but that the incontinent man does not thus persist? For if any one chooses, or pursues, that thing on account of this, he pursues indeed and chooses this thing per se, but the former thing from accident. We speak, however, of that which is per se simply. Hence it is possible that the one may persist in any kind of opinion, but that the other may abandon any kind of opinion. But the one simply persists in true opinion, and the other does not. There are, however, some persons who are disposed to persist in an opinion, and these are those who are called pertinacious, such as the obstinate, and those who are not easily persuaded to relinquish their opinions, who have indeed something similar to the continent man, in the same manner as the prodigal has to the liberal, and the audacious to the confident man. But in many things they are different. For the confident man, indeed, is not changed through passion and desire, since when it so happens, he is easily persuaded. But the pertinacious man is not persuaded by reason, since most of this description admits desire, and are led by pleasures. Those persons, however, are pertinacious, who have certain opinions of their own, and also unlearned and rustic men. And those, indeed, who have certain opinions of their own, are pertinacious through pleasure and pain. For they rejoice when they are victorious, if they are not induced to change their opinion, and they are grieved when their opinions, as if they were decrees, are without efficacy. Hence they resemble the incontinent more than the continent man. But there are certain persons who do not persist in their opinions, yet not through incontinence, such as Neoptolemus in the Philoctetes of Sophocles, since he did not persist in his opinion, yet not on account of pleasure, but on account of the beautiful in conduct. For to him it was beautiful to speak the truth, though he was persuaded by Ulysses to lie. For not every one who does anything on account of pleasure is intemperate, or a bad, or an incontinent man, but he is intemperate who does it on account of base pleasure. Since however there is a character of such a kind as to be delighted less than is proper with corporeal pleasures, and not to abide in the decisions of reason, the continent man is a medium between this character and the incontinent man. For the incontinent man, indeed, does not abide in the decisions of reason, because he is delighted with corporeal pleasures more than is proper, but this man, because he is delighted with them less than is proper. The continent man, however, abides in the decision of reason, and is not changed through anything else. It is also necessary, if continence is a good thing, that both the contrary habits should be bad, as it appears that they are. Because, however, one of these characters, viz. The man who is delighted less than is proper with corporeal pleasures, exists but among a few men, and is rarely seen. Hence as temperance appears to be contrary to intemperance alone, thus also continence to incontinence. But since many things are denominated from similitude, the continence also of the temperate man follows according to similitude. For both the continent and the temperate man do nothing contrary to reason, through the influence of corporeal pleasures. But the one indeed, viz. The continent man, possesses, but the other does not possess depraved desires, and the one indeed is a man of such a description, as not to be delighted contrary to reason, but the other is delighted, indeed, it is not led by this delight. The incontinent and the intemperate man also resemble each other, though, indeed, they are different characters. Both, however, pursue corporeal delights, but the latter, indeed, thinking that it is proper, and the other not thinking that it is proper, to pursue them. Chapter 10. Nor is it possible that the same person can at one and the same time be prudent and incontinent. For it has been shown by us that a prudent man is at the same time a man of worthy manners. Again, a man is not only prudent from knowing what ought to be done, but also from acting properly. But the incontinent man does not act properly. Nothing, however, prevents the incontinent man from being skilful. Hence, also, sometimes certain persons appear to be prudent, but incontinent, because skilfulness differs from prudence, in the way we have before explained. And these, so far as pertains to reason, indeed, are near to each other, but they differ according to deliberate choice. Neither, therefore, does the incontinent man possess reason, as one who knows and contemplates, but as one who is asleep, or intoxicated. And he acts indeed voluntarily, for after a certain manner he acts knowing both what he does, and for the sake of what he acts as he does. But he is not depraved, for his deliberate choice is good, so that he is half depraved, and not unjust, because he is not insidious. For one incontinent man, indeed, i.e. the man who is incontinent from debility, does not persist in what he has deliberated. And he who is of a melancholy temperament, i.e. the man who is precipitately incontinent, is not, in short, disposed to deliberate. The incontinent man, therefore, resembles a city, which decrees, indeed, everything that is proper, and has good laws, but uses none of them. As Anaxandrides revilingly said, quote, "The state consults, but its own laws neglects." But the bad man resembles a city, which uses indeed laws, but uses bad laws. Incontinence, however, and continence are conversant with that which exceeds the habit of the multitude. For the continent man persists more, but the incontinent man less, than the multitude are able to do, in the decisions of reason. The incontinence, however, of the melancholy is more easily cured, than the incontinence of those who deliberate, indeed, but do not persist in doing what they have deliberated to do. Those also who are incontinent from custom may be more easily cured than those who are naturally so. For it is more easy to change custom than nature. For on this very account it is difficult to change custom, viz. Because it resembles nature. As Evenus also says, quote, "By long attention custom is produced, and is at length as nature to mankind." We have shown, therefore, what continence and incontinence, and also what endurance and effeminacy are, and how these habits subsist with reference to each other. Chapter 11. The discussion, however, of pleasure and pain pertains to him who philosophizes about the political science. For he is the architect, as it were, of the end, looking to which we say that one thing is evil, but another is simply good. Again, it is likewise necessary that we should make these the objects of consideration. For we admit that ethical virtue and vice are conversant with pleasures and pains, and most men assert that felicity is accompanied with pleasure. Hence, also, they denominate the blessed man, from especially rejoicing. To some, therefore, no pleasure appears to be good, neither essentially, nor from accident, for good and pleasure are not the same thing. But to others, some pleasures appear to be good, but many of them to be bad. Others again, in the third place, assert that though all pleasures were good, yet at the same time that which is most excellent cannot be pleasure. In short, therefore, they say, pleasure is not good, because all pleasure is a generation tending to a sensible nature, as to its end, but no generation is allied to ends. As no act of building a house, i.e. the energy of building, is allied to the house. Again, the temperate man avoids pleasures. Farther still, the prudent man pursues a freedom from pain, and not the delectable. To which may be added, that pleasures are an impediment to the energy of prudence, and this in proportion to the delight which they afford, as is the case with venereal pleasures. For no one, when engaged in this pleasure, can intellectually perceive anything. Again, pleasure is not the offspring of art, though everything which is good is the work of art. Farther still, children and brutes pursue pleasures. But that all pleasures are not worthy is indicated by this, that some are base and disgraceful and pernicious. For some pleasures produce disease. It is also evident that pleasure is not the best of things, because it is not an end, but generation. Such therefore nearly are the assertions respecting pleasure. Chapter 12. That it does not happen, however, from these arguments, that pleasure is neither good, nor the best of things, is evident from the following considerations. In the first place, indeed, because good is predicated in a twofold respect. For one kind of good is simply and absolutely good, but another is good to a certain person. And natures and habits receive the same division, so that this will also be the case with motions and generations. With respect to these pleasures likewise, which appear to be bad, some indeed are simply bad, but are not bad to a certain person, but to him are eligible. And some are not pleasures to this person, except once and for a short time, but they are not eligible to him. And some are not pleasures, but only appear to be so, viz. Those which are attended with pain, and are for the sake of a remedy, such as those of the sick. Again, since of good, one kind is energy, but another is habit, those pleasures which restore their possessor to his natural habit are delectable. In desires, however, there is the energy of an indigent and imperfect habit and nature. There are also pleasures which are unaccompanied with pain and desire, such as the energies of contemplation, nature in these not being indigent. But that some pleasures are delectable of themselves, and others only on account of the indigence which they remove, is indicated by this, that men are not pleased with the same delectable thing when the indigence of nature is removed, and when it is not. For in the former case they are delighted with things simply and absolutely pleasant, but in the latter with their contraries. For they are then delighted with things sharp and bitter, none of which are either naturally or absolutely delectable, so that neither are they pleasures. For as things delectable are to each other, so likewise are the pleasures produced by these. Farther still, it is not necessary that something else should be better than pleasure, as some say the end of generation is better than generation. For pleasures are not generations, nor are all of them accompanied with generation, but they are energies, and an end. Nor do pleasures happen when things are passing into existence, but from the use of things. Nor is the end of all pleasures something different from them, but of those only, which lead to the perfection of nature. Hence it is not well said that pleasure is a sensible generation, but it must rather be said that it is the energy of habit according to nature, and instead of saying that it is a sensible, it must be said that it is an unimpeded generation. It appears however to be a certain generation, because it is properly good, for they fancied that energy is generation, but it is different from it. To say also that pleasures are bad, because some delectable things produce diseases, is what may likewise be said of things salubrious, for some of these are bad, as to pecuniary affairs. In this respect, therefore, both will be bad, and yet they are not on this account bad. For contemplation is likewise sometimes injurious to health, yet the pleasure proceeding from each habit is neither an impediment to prudence, nor to any habit. But the pleasures which are an impediment to these are such as are foreign, since the pleasures arising from contemplation and discipline produce in a greater degree contemplation and learning. But it reasonably happens that no pleasure is the work of art, since neither is there an art of any other energy, but of power, though the arts pertaining to unguents and cooking appear to be the arts of pleasure. with respect to the assertions also that the temperate man avoids pleasures, and that the prudent man pursues a life unattended with pain, and that children and brutes pursue pleasure, all these are solved after the same manner. For since we have shown how all pleasures are, in a certain respect, simply good, and how they are not good, hence children and brutes pursue such pleasures as are accompanied with desire, and pain, and are corporeal, and the prudent man pursues a freedom of pain from these. For of such a kind are these pleasures, viz. They are accompanied with pain. Children and brutes, also, pursue the excesses of these according to which the intemperate man becomes intemperate. Hence the temperate man avoids these. Since there are also pleasures which belong to the temperate man. Chapter 13. It is also admitted that pain is an evil, and is to be avoided. For one kind of pain, indeed, is simply evil, but another in a certain respect, because it is an impediment. That, however, which is contrary to what is to be avoided, so far as it is something to be avoided and is evil, is good. Pleasure therefore is necessarily something good, for the solution of Speusippus is not appropriate, viz. That pleasure is contrary to pain, just as the greater is contrary to the less, and the equal, since no one will say that pleasure is a certain evil. But nothing prevents a certain pleasure from being the best of things, if certain pleasures are bad, just as a certain science, viz. Wisdom, is the best of sciences, though some sciences are bad. Perhaps too, it must necessarily be the case, that if of every habit there are unimpeded energies, whether felicity is the energy of all habits, or of some one of them, this energy, if it is unimpeded, is most eligible. But this is pleasure, so that a certain pleasure will be the best of things, many pleasures, if it should so happen, being simply bad. And on this account all men are of opinion that a happy is a delectable life, and they reasonably connect pleasure with felicity. For no energy is perfect when it is impeded, but felicity is among the number of perfect energies. Hence the happy man requires the goods pertaining to the body, and external possessions, and also good fortune, lest the want of these should be an impediment to his felicity. Those, however, who say that a man, if he is a good man, may be happy, though he should be tormented in a wheel, and fall into the greatest calamities, say nothing to the purpose, whether they assert this willingly or unwillingly, because, however, the happy man requires good fortune. Prosperity appears to some persons to be the same with felicity, though it is not the same, since prosperity, when it is excessive, is an impediment to felicity. Perhaps, likewise, it is no longer just to call prosperity, when it is excessive, good fortune. For the definition of prosperity has a reference to felicity. That all brutes too, and all men, pursue pleasure, is an indication that pleasure is in a certain respect the best of things. Quote, that fame which crowds of humankind extol will ne'er completely perish. Close quote. Because, however, neither the same nature, nor the same habit, either is, or appears to be the best, neither do all men pursue the same pleasure, though pleasure is pursued by all men. Perhaps also they pursue not the pleasure which they fancy, nor that which they say they pursue, but the same pleasure, for all things naturally possess something divine. Corporeal pleasures, however, obtain the inheritance of the name, because men are for the most part occupied in them, and all animals partake of them. Because therefore these pleasures alone are generally known, these are the only pleasures which are fancied to have an existence. It is, however, evident that unless pleasure is good, and also energy, it will not be possible for the happy man to live delectably. For on what account would delight be requisite to a happy life, if it is not good? But it would also be possible for life to be happy, though attended with pain, for pain will neither be evil nor good, if pleasure is not good. Why therefore is pain to be avoided? Neither therefore will the life of the worthy man be more delectable, unless his energies are more delectable. Chapter 14. With respect, however, to corporeal pleasures, we must direct our attention to the assertions of those who say that some pleasures are very eligible, viz. Such as are worthy, but not corporeal pleasures, with which the intemperate man is conversant. Why, therefore, are the pains contrary to these pleasures depraved? For good is contrary to evil. Or shall we say, that necessary pleasures are so far good, because that which is not evil is good, or that they are good to a certain extent? For in those habits and motions in which there is no excess of that which is better, there is no excess of pleasure, but in those in which there is an excess of what is better, there is also an excess of pleasure. But of corporeal goods there is an excess, and the bad man becomes bad by pursuing the excess of pleasure, and not necessary pleasures. For all depraved men are delighted with meats and wine, and venery, but not in such a manner as is proper, and they are affected in a contrary way with respect to pain, for they do not avoid the excess of pain, but pain altogether. For pain is not contrary to excess, but to him who pursues excess. Since, however, it is not only necessary to speak the truth, but also to assign the cause of a false assertion, for this contributes to credibility. Since when the cause why a thing seems to be true, though it is not, appears to be reasonable, it then gives greater credibility to the truth. This being the case, it must be shown why corporeal pleasures appear to be more eligible. In the first place, therefore, they appear to be so, because they expel pain, and because excessive, and in short, corporeal pleasure is pursued on account of the excesses of pain, as a remedy. But the remedies are vehement, and on this account, corporeal pleasures are pursued, because they become more apparent when placed by that which is contrary to them. Pleasure, therefore, does not appear to be good, for these two reasons, as we have before observed, because some pleasures indeed are the actions of a depraved nature, either from the birth of the animal, as those of a brute, or they originate from custom, such as those of bad men. But other pleasures are remedies, because they are the pleasures of that which is in want, and it is better to have them, than for them to be passing into existence. And others happen to be pleasures of that which is in a perfect condition. From accident, therefore, they are worthy pleasures. Again, pleasures that are vehement are pursued by those who are incapable of being delighted with other pleasures. These, therefore, procure for themselves certain thirsts. Hence, when pleasures are innoxious, they are not to be reprehended, but when they are noxious, they are bad. For those that pursue these pleasures have no other with which they are delighted, and if neither these, nor any others are present, the vulgar are in pain, through the indigence of nature. For the animal always labours, as physical arguments testify, since, as physiologists say, to see and to hear are painful, but we are now accustomed to these energies, and therefore do not perceive the pain. In a similar manner in youth, in consequence of the augmentation which then takes place, we are affected like those who are intoxicated, and youth is a delectable period of human life. But the melancholic naturally always require a remedy, for their body experiences a continual molestation from its temperament, through the acrimony of the bile, and they are always agitated with vehement appetite. Pleasure, however, always excels pain, as well the pain which is contrary to pleasure, as that which is casual, if the pleasure is strong, and on this account the melancholic becomes intemperate and depraved. But the pleasures which are without pain have no excess, and these are such as are derived from things naturally delectable, and which are not accidentally so. I mean, however, by things delectable from accident, remedies, for because it happens that we are cured of a malady, the part which is sane performing something, on this account, the remedies appear to be delectable. But by things naturally delectable, I mean those which produce the action of such a nature, i.e. which produce an energy essentially adapted to such a nature. Nothing, however, which remains the same is always delectable, because our nature is not simple, but there is also something in it different, according to which it is corruptible. Hence, if the one part does any thing, this to the other nature is preternatural. But when both the parts are equalized, that which is performed neither appears to be painful nor pleasing. For if there is any being, the nature of which is simple, to this being the same action will always be most delectable. Hence, God always rejoices according to one simple pleasure. For there is not only an energy of corporeal motion, but also of immobility, and pleasure exists more abundantly in rest than in motion. But mutation is the sweetest of all things, according to the poet, through a certain depravity. For as a depraved man is mutable, so likewise is the nature which requires mutation, for it is neither simple nor good. And thus we have spoken concerning continence and incontinence, pleasure and pain, and have shown what each of them is, and how some of them are good, but others bad. It now remains that we speak concerning friendship. End of Book 7.